Chapter 451. Beifeng Principality, Wizard Tower. Although he had fused with a little divinity, the negative will of the divinity still had some influence on him. It could magnify the negative emotions of the soul, such as irritation, desire, killing, and so on. Su Lin needed to calm down a little bit. He now had a lot of divinity. In addition to the divinity of the brain hunters, the heartless church left in the valley was also thriving. Now, the heartless church had 600 or 700 devout believers. After a while, when it was time to perform blood sacrifices to the evil god, Su Lin would directly harvest them. Now, the kobolds were living quite well. In the valley, the biting north wind was blocked. Although the temperature was still very low, it was much better than the wilderness. Su Lin arranged a large number of people to monitor there. There was only one entrance in the whole valley, and these kobolds were simply turtles in a jar. Su Lin was not worried about the evil god of the heartless. In fact, the strength of evil gods was much higher. The lowest level of evil gods was only legendary, and it was not surprising that there were a few mid-level gods among the powerful ones. The evil god of the heartless should be at the stage of a weak god. In terms of level, it should be about level 35. However, this was the strength in the astral plane. It would be stronger in its nest. If it entered the main material plane, its strength would drop to level 30 or even lower. In the past, Soren might have been a little afraid of the strength of level 30. Now, with the magic particle rail cannon, all creatures were equal. Even if it could withstand one shot, it would be another shot. The evil gods that came to the material plane could not withstand this kind of attack. As for the evil god's avatar, the strength of this avatar was only level 25. According to Sullen's current strength, he could easily crush it. Sending an avatar here was basically sending food to Su Lin. Sullen's goal was to create an avatar with divine power. A divine avatar would have at least 1 point of divinity, and some would have more. This was a way to continuously obtain divinity. Even if the evil god of the heartless was killed several times and no longer fell for the trick, Su Lin could change to another evil god to continue this operation. Although he didn't know how many evil gods there were at least hundreds of them, even though the major churches didn't record it. With so many evil gods, even if he only obtained a little divinity each time, he would still be able to obtain over 100 divinity points with over 100 evil gods taking turns. Of course, after doing so, it would not be easy to deceive even more evil gods. Of course, when he was strong enough and the floating city was built, Su Lin would have no problem going to the astral plane to take out the evil god's true body. As for divinity, Su Lin also planned to get some for Hathaway and the others. Divinity was also very useful to them. To be honest, although the gods were powerful, there were too many restrictions. They had to fulfill their duties as gods, and at the same time, they could not leave the god's kingdom at will. Most of the time, they worked year after year, day after day. If they only worked for 180 years, it would be fine, but in fact, as long as the gods still existed, this work had to continue. This was simply worse than the 990s and 007s of modern society. If the god's clergy was more terrible, such as the god of death, he had to guide the dead to tidy up the underworld all year round. He didn't even have a day off. After all, there was no day when no one was immortal. There were many gods who controlled more than 1 or 2 clergies. The more clergies they controlled, the busier they were. Therefore, some gods were tired of this work and wanted to resign, but they also had to find a successor. Therefore, some gods divided their clergies to others. Among them, the best were the mother goddess of the earth and the ancient god of death, Jurgal. As ancient gods who had survived from ancient times, their strength had long surpassed the great divine powers and become greater divine powers. Even if they were stripped of their clergies, their strength would not be reduced too much. The mother goddess of the earth divided all of her priesthoods and gave them to her descendants. She then went into seclusion. The god of death, Jurgal, was even more cunning. He gave his priesthoods to 3 people and then directly caused the death of the 3 gods of death. They were the god of strife, Ban, the god of death, Mirko, and the god of murder, Bul. None of these 3 guys were easy to deal with. They directly caused the biggest chaos since the ancient gods retired and the destruction of the arcane kingdom. In this chaos, gods fell, and humans succeeded in becoming gods. For the god of death, it was definitely a wonderful feast. Su Len was now only ready to get divinity. He had no interest in clergies and divine power at all. Whoever wanted to do this kind of work could do it. All kinds of work in the northern city were not suspended because of the snow. Instead, they took advantage of this time to start mass production of all kinds of materials. At the same time, a large number of people were sent to the new city for construction. After more than 3 months of development, the construction of the new city could be said to be changing with each passing day. The original simple camp had become a small city. The size of the city was the same as Mirror Lake City. Now the construction of the houses and walls had been completed. Other kinds of public facilities would be slowly built later. After staying in the northern city for a few days, Su Len returned to Sanfelto City through the transmission formation. There was no snow in Sanfelto City, but the weather had turned cold. Phyllis and Alex were in charge of the internal affairs during Sullen's absence. The few cities around Sanfelto City were now completely under their control. The nearby nobles who were still outwardly obedient but covertly opposed had also become well-behaved. One by one, they paid all the taxes for the year. According to the original system of the Kingdom of Florence, the nobles had absolute rights in their respective territories, but all the nobles had to pay taxes to the king. Originally, the king of the Kingdom of Florence directly controlled about 1/5 to 1/4 of the entire kingdom. The other 3 major families together controlled about 1/3 of the kingdom's territory. The rest of the territory was controlled by nobles of various sizes. However, this time, after Su Len ascended the throne, many nobles rebelled. Some even acted as fence-sitters. For those rebelling nobles, Su Len had decided to take back their territories. At the same time, the territories directly under the king needed to be adjusted. Although the territories directly under the king did not rebel, there were all kinds of small movements in private. The people who controlled these territories were originally trusted by King Henry. How much loyalty they had to Su Len still needed to be considered. Su Len did not think that he was the master of destiny. After he ascended the throne, these people would be intimidated by his domineering aura and directly kowtow to him. Previously, these people had pretended to be obedient to him. Although he pretended not to see the small movements in private, it did not mean that he would not pursue it. He spent 2 months re-recruiting and reorganizing the original army in Sanfelto City. He also incorporated the army from North Town into it. He wanted to form a fighting force as soon as possible and then use it to intimidate those people. Next, Su Len would replace those people bit by bit and then appoint his own people. It would definitely not be smooth sailing. Those nobles and officials would not give up their rights so easily. The army in his hands was the last resort. If those nobles were willing to cooperate, Su Len did not mind giving them some benefits. He even reappointed them as officials after they were re-educated. If they were not willing to cooperate, he would directly take them down. If they dared to rebel, he would send the army to eliminate them. Sanfelto City had recruited a little over 20,000 people. This was after Su Len brought some money from North Town City. The wealth in the palace and the wealth he plundered from the nobles were all invested in the reconstruction of the city. Su Len realized that the more territories he occupied, the less money he had. If it were not for the taxes from the nobles, Sullen's funds would have almost run out. After 2 months, the army in Sanfelto City was ready to fight. With these troops in hand, Sullen's plan to take over the king's territory could also begin. The nobles directly under the king were basically palace nobles. In the Kingdom of Florence, there were many types of nobles. The nobles with the highest value were those with powerful territories. The second type of nobles were the palace nobles. These nobles were appointed by the king or other nobles. They were usually the subordinates of the king and the nobles. They served the king and the nobles or managed the territory. The third type of nobles were powerful professionals who were granted the title of nobles. As long as these nobles swore allegiance, they would be rewarded with manors and castles. They also had the opportunity to become hereditary nobles. The fourth kind was honorary nobility, which was used for commendation or by donating a sum of money. It was the least valuable among all the nobles and was only a title. At the beginning, Su Luan spent money to buy the title of honorary nobility. Of course, this title also had some advantages, such as no restrictions on travel and some aristocratic privileges. These nobles' titles were only knights. They were lifelong. Most of the second sons of nobles who did not have the right to inherit were also honorary nobles. Another type of nobles were development nobles. As long as one bought a development order, they could become a development nobleman. However, whether one could succeed in the end depended on their own ability. Most of the king's territories were managed by the palace nobles who served the royal family. After the army was reorganized, Sulen issued a transfer order to the royal territories closest to San Felto city. He asked the palace nobles in the surrounding cities to report to the king's city. These cities were only 60 kilometers away from the nearest one. The furthest one was only 80 kilometers away. They were all medium-sized cities with a population of around 30,000 people. After sending out the messengers, Sulen ordered the army to prepare for war. Chapter 452. Just as Sulen was waiting for the replies from the city managers, another piece of news arrived. Marquis Savoy's army had been stopped by the rebels. When Sulen received this news, he was very surprised. Marquis Savoy was a legendary knight, and the army he led was quite strong as well. On the other hand, the nobles at the border were not even conferred knights, let alone legendary knights. Their army was also pieced together. However, this motley crew was able to stop Marquis Savoy's attack. After reading the information, Sulen finally understood that the reason why the nobles were able to stop Marquis Savoy's attack was not only because of their geographical advantage, but also because of the intervention of another country. The few rebellious nobles were bordering the Bane Kingdom. No one knew what price they had paid to get the Bane Kingdom to help them. The Bane Kingdom had sent an army of 5,000 men and a few palace mages, successfully stopping Marquis Savoy's army at Kaman Mountain Pass. The most powerful among the few nobles was Count Cecil. His territory took up half of the rebellious nobles' territories, and Chili Wind City was the largest city there. It could be said that it had always been the largest city and transit point for trade with the Bane Kingdom. These nobles were almost completely dependent on the Bane Kingdom economically, so they were closer to the Bane Kingdom. When the Florentine king was replaced, the nobles in Chili Wind City rebelled. When they found out that Sulen had ordered Marquis Savoy to go on an expedition, they immediately surrendered to the Bane Kingdom, hoping to borrow the Bane Kingdom's strength to go against Sulen. In the beginning, this piece of land had always been contested between the Florentine Kingdom and the Bane Kingdom. Since 100 years ago, after the Florentine Kingdom had completely won, this piece of land had been occupied by Florence. After the relationship between the two countries had gradually eased, this place had become an outpost for trade between the Florentine Kingdom and the Bane Kingdom. Originally, the strongest people here were only a few knight commanders. According to Surin and Marquis Savoy's plan, the army could easily wipe out the rebels. However, when they arrived, they discovered that the nobles had built a fortress at Carmen Pass. Carmen Pass was a mountain pass in the Carrillo Mountains. The narrowest part of it was only 150 meters wide. It was the largest and smoothest mountain pass from the Kingdom of Florence to Chili Wind City. The other passages were all rugged mountain roads, and it was impossible for an army to pass through. Therefore, after they blocked this passage, the Kingdom of Florence could only attack by force. Originally, the Marquis of Savoy thought that he could rely on his own strength to break through the barrier. After all, a legendary knight could easily defeat thousands of enemies. However, he never thought that Count Cecil had already joined forces with the Bern Kingdom. There were 5 high-grade wizards guarding this checkpoint. Legendary knights were powerful, but as a proper knight, the Marquis of Savoy did not have any magical abilities. When faced with spells, he was often at a disadvantage. If he was not careful, he would even be injured by a high-grade wizard. Otherwise, the warriors wouldn't have the title of Silk Warrior. Although the traditional warriors and knights were strong in close combat, the wizards had too many ways to deal with them. Just a maze spell was enough to make them dizzy. On the other hand, the wizards were different. They had mastered a large number of spells that allowed them to deal with almost any situation. A legendary wizard who was prepared was almost invincible. This was why the wizards had such a high status in this world. It was because of the existence of these wizards that the Marquis of Savoy could not use his power. In addition, the 150-meter-long city wall directly blocked the Marquis of Savoy's army outside. Now, the Marquis of Savoy had no choice but to ask for help from Sulen. After knowing that the Bern Kingdom had supported Coldwind City, Sulen's face became gloomy. Things had become a little troublesome. This was his first battle since he ascended the throne. If he did not obtain a clean victory, the lords in the north who had already surrendered would likely rebel again. Sulen did not have the slightest doubt about this. Creatures like nobles were born with the talent of flattering the strong and stepping on the weak. Once they found out that Sulen was not as powerful as they thought, the entire kingdom of Florence would be in a complete mess. It could be said that the Marquis of Savoy's expedition could only be a victory for Sulen. After hearing about the Marquis of Savoy, Sulen had already made a decision. Hathaway was studying the Enigma technology and had no time to go there. Moreover, there were only a few high-grade wizards. Sending Hathaway there was a complete waste of her talent. Therefore, Sulen thought for a moment and decided to send Alex, Karina, or Grace. The 2 4th-grade spellcasters could easily take care of the level 3 wizards. After making the decision, Sulen found Alex and asked her to go with Karina to help the Marquis of Savoy. In the North Wind Tower, after receiving Su Luan's order, Karina didn't hesitate and directly went to the front line with Alex. There were also 10 winged people with them. These winged people were Alex's people, and they were going to protect their queen. Hathaway had just finished her study. The Enigma knowledge involved a lot of knowledge. During this period, Hathaway would spend 2 hours every day studying it. Then, she would take some time to study other knowledge. In the afternoon, she would study the corpse of the brain hunter that Sulen sent back in the laboratory. This brain hunter's corpse was quite valuable. It could be used to make a few outstanding magic items. Hathaway was thinking about how to make it. There were many monsters of this level in the multiverse, but there were also very few of them. The strongest monster in the multiverse was the Ancient Abhorrence. Their full name was Abhorrence from the Ancient Era. It was said that they were powerful monsters that had existed since the Ancient Era. That period belonged to the era of the giant dragons. The entire multiverse was ruled by the giant dragons. During that period, the giant dragons were far more powerful than they were now. Just like the dragon kings, their bodies alone could reach tens of thousands of meters or even larger. Later, because the existence of the giant dragons affected the development of the multiverse began to restrict the giant dragons. In order to survive, the giant dragons could only shrink their bodies generation by generation. The Ancient Abhorrence was passed down from that period. To be able to be hated by the powerful giant dragons, one could imagine how powerful these monsters were. Of course, the most powerful Abhorrence creatures were the Abhorrence dragons. There were also Abhorrence dragons, blue diamond dragons, spirit demon dragons, stardust dragons, rainbow dragons, and so on. There was also the Centimanes. These monsters were not easy to deal with. For example, the abhorrence dragon was a walking nuclear weapon. The dragon's breath was equivalent to an atomic explosion. This thing was really an existence that could destroy an entire plane. Many of the ancient abhorrents actually had the bloodline of the gods. It could be said that they were a type of abhorrence. Other than monsters like the ancient abhorrents, the next level were monsters like the ancient evils. These monsters were also very difficult to deal with. They were almost at the advanced legendary level. Below them were the abhorrence monsters, which corresponded to the legendary level. The lowest level of ordinary monsters generally did not exceed the legendary level. Most of the material planes were like this. The brain hunter that Su Len killed last time was, strictly speaking, an ancient evil level monster. Monsters at the level of the Archean hatred were very rare now. They had basically been destroyed or sealed by the Order Ancient Gods. Of course, there were still some Archean hatred that had fallen into a deep slumber, and some were living in some corners of the astral plane. For example, the abhorrence dragons and blue diamond dragons. These kinds of creatures were not even provoked by the gods. In order to get rid of the ancient abhorrence, the Order Ancient Gods had paid a heavy price. Now, many monsters like the ancient evils in the multiverse had been sealed. Many monk monasteries were suppressing the ancient evils. How many pieces of equipment can be made with these materials? Su Len looked at the brain hunter that had been cut up and asked. 5 or 6 pieces. Hathaway didn't even raise her head as she said, "This brain hunter's body is badly damaged. Otherwise, it would be able to make at least 2 pieces of legendary equipment. The remaining materials can only be used to make 1 piece of legendary equipment. The rest can be used to make high-grade magic items." 1 then. Su Len nodded without hesitation. "Other than these materials, we need other materials." Hathaway looked at some of the inventory and said. "See if these are enough." Su Len took out all kinds of magic materials he had accumulated. Seeing Su Len take out adamantine, mithril, orichalcum, star iron, high-quality magic gems, and many other materials, Hathaway widened her eyes in surprise. "So many. Did you rob the giant dragon's vault? The giant dragon wouldn't have so many rare materials." Su Len said proudly. "Indeed." Hathaway nodded. "The giant dragon has more gold. They don't have this kind of advanced magic metal." Su Luen smiled faintly. "What kind of equipment are you going to make this time?" Hathaway looked at the materials in front of her and said. "Can you make something to defend against psychic attacks?" Su Len asked. There were not many psychic items. This kind of attack was very subtle and could be sneak attacked if one was not careful. Su Len originally only had 1 defensive ring. Now that it was completed, he naturally wanted to take it back. Yes, these materials can be made into leather armor, some rings, amulets, accessories, and so on. The skin of a brain hunter was very tough. Ordinary swords would not be able to leave a wound on it. Moreover, its skin had very high magic resistance. It was very suitable to be used to make leather armor. As for making wizard robes, it was probably not enough. The body of a brain hunter was too damaged to make a wizard robe. Chapter 453. Although the brain hunters looked very disgusting and their skin was yellow in color and looked like a brain, the material of their skin was really good. It could almost be compared to dragon skin. The dragon skin here was not the skin of a lesser dragon, but the skin of a true giant dragon. It's a pity that the magic energy particle railgun was too ruthless. Half of the brain hunter's body was damaged. Otherwise, it would be more than enough to make a wizard robe. Hathaway looked at the brain hunter's body with some regret. The brain hunter's body was not small, but it had tentacles, eyes, and a sac that stored its brain. Its intact skin was very limited, and most of it was damaged. There was not much that could be used. The skin could be made into leather armor, and the brain hunter's eyes were also good stuff. They were the part of the brain hunter's body that emitted energy. It had high spiritual resistance and magic power, so it could be used to make offensive or defensive items. The other parts could be used to make many items. Basically, this brain hunter's body could be used to its fullest potential. While Sulan and Hathaway were making magic items in the Northwind Tower, Alex and Karina led their men to the northwest of San Felto City. The Marquis of Savoy was currently confronting the few rebellious nobles. Kaman Mountain Pass could be said to be easy to defend and hard to attack. The narrowest part was 150 meters, and the path was rugged. In such a place, it was impossible to use one's strength. Even if the Marquis of Savoy brought 10,000 elites, it would be useless. As for the Marquis of Savoy, although he could charge up the city wall, he would not be able to gain a foothold. As a legendary knight, Savoy could not fly, so the wizards could exhaust him with flying spells. The Marquis of Savoy had been trapped here for an entire month. Of course, even if they could not break through the pass, the rebellious army did not dare to fight back. Once they left the pass, even with the help of the few high-grade wizards, the Marquis of Savoy was confident that he could defeat them. However, the rebellious army did not respond at all. No matter how much the Marquis of Savoy yelled and threatened, they would not fight. It was obvious that they were going to wear them out. They were backed by the territory and had an abundance of food and resources. The rations that the Marquis of Savoy's army could only be transported from other places. If this continued, the Marquis of Savoy would not be willing to seek help from Sulan. For the Marquis of Savoy, who had just joined Sulan, failing his first mission would directly affect his importance in Sulan's heart. After struggling for a long time, he finally asked for help from Sulan. Alex and Karina moved quickly. It only took them 2 days to reach Kaman Mountain Pass. They then went straight to the main camp of the Marquis of Savoy. Sir Marquis, there are 2 wizards who said they were sent by His Majesty to see you. Just as Savoy was having a headache over how to break through the Kaman Pass and pacify the rebellious nobles, a personal guard hurried in to report. Sorcerer sent by His Majesty? Invite him in. Savoy's eyes flashed with joy. The guard turned around and was about to leave, but the Marquis of Savoy stopped him. Forget it. I'll go greet them myself. Sir, you are the commander of an army. How can you greet them yourself? The guard tried to persuade him. All right, no need to persuade me anymore. I know what I'm doing. The Marquis waved his hand. Then, he personally led a group of people to welcome Alex, Karina, and the others. At the same time, he ordered his men to prepare a welcome banquet. Marquis of Savoy, there's no need to prepare. The situation is urgent. Alex said, His Majesty Sulan sent us here as soon as he received your request for help. How strong are the enemies? Your Excellencies, I'll get straight to the point. The Marquis of Savoy smiled awkwardly and said, the Kaman Pass is in a unique location. The rebels have built a fortress at the narrowest part of the pass. With our strength, we could have won even in this terrain. At most, we would have lost a few soldiers. However, the rebels have sent 5 high-grade wizards. Our soldiers are no match for them. Even when I personally led an attack, it was stopped by them. As long as you can help me deal with or delay those 5 high-grade wizards, I have full confidence that we can break through this pass. The Marquis of Savoy said without hesitation. 5 high-grade wizards, right? Are you sure they only have a few wizards here? Alex asked. I'm sure, Your Excellency. If they had more wizards, they would have launched a counterattack long ago instead of wasting their time here. The Marquis of Savoy nodded. That's good. Bring your men and continue attacking the city tomorrow. As for those wizards, leave them to me and Karina, Alex said. All right. Hearing Alex's promise, the Marquis of Savoy was overjoyed. He had been stuck here for an entire month. He had to eliminate the rebels as soon as possible to maintain his position in front of Sulen. The next morning, before the sun had even risen, there was movement in the army to quell the rebellion. Troops quickly gathered after breakfast. Some of these troops were the private soldiers of the Marquis of Savoy, while others were the troops of the nobles under him. There were also some mercenaries who had come to seek refuge with him. The entire army took half an hour to gather. They then began to enter the Kaman Pass in batches. The Kaman Pass was shaped like an hourglass. It was wide in 2 sections and narrowed as one went in. Finally, it was only 150 meters wide in the middle of the pass. Now, this passage was blocked by a 20-meter-tall wall. On both sides of the wall were steep cliffs that ordinary people couldn't climb. The rebels had already received the news and were ready for the Marquis of Savoy's army to attack. Looking at the mottled brown marks on the wall, the Marquis of Savoy's face turned cold. Those marks were the bloodstains left behind by the deaths of his soldiers. They had already turned dark brown. The thick smell of blood in front of the fortress couldn't be dispersed even by the biting wind. The north wind whistled, bringing with it a bone-piercing chill. It was now winter. The Marquis of Savoy had to break through this place before the first snow of the year. Then, he would occupy a city. Otherwise, the biting cold of winter would severely reduce the number of his troops. It was already 9 in the morning. Seeing that the army was ready, the Marquis of Savoy didn't hesitate to give the order to attack the city. After fighting a few times, the Marquis of Savoy had already probed the enemy's strength. After having the mercenaries as the vanguard, he arranged for the elite troops to follow. The Marquis of Savoy wore an excellent knight's plate armor. He pointed his sword and said, "All troops, attack." The battle reached its climax as soon as it started. The army carried the ladders and watchtowers, braving the rain of arrows as they advanced quickly. One soldier after another climbed the ladders skillfully to attack the fortress. On the other hand, the soldiers on the city wall pushed down the scaling ladders and the watchtowers slowly advanced. These watchtowers, which were taller than the city wall, were filled with archers. When they arrived at the predetermined location, they immediately launched a rain of arrows to suppress the enemy. After gaining the upper hand, the archers on the walls were immediately suppressed. But soon, the rebels mobilized even more archers to counterattack. The space in the watchtowers was limited, so naturally, they couldn't compare to the number of archers on the walls. They used fire arrows. Even if the watchtowers were covered in cowhide to prevent fire, they were still set ablaze by the large number of fire arrows. The watchtower was ablaze, and the archers and soldiers on top of it ran down in fear. Some even jumped down directly from the watchtower. However, most people would be injured if they jumped down from a watchtower that was more than 20 meters high. Some unlucky fellows were burned to death by the flames. The sound of fighting filled the entire valley, and the smell of blood was nauseating. One watchtower was burned, but even more watchtowers were pushed up. Under the all-out attack, the rebels on the walls were completely suppressed. Seeing more and more soldiers climb up the walls, the rebels finally couldn't sit still. One by one, the high-ranking knights began to act. Under the leadership of these knights, the rebels quickly stabilized their position and repelled the first wave of attacks. Seeing this, the Marquis of Savoy wasn't surprised. After reorganizing the army, the second wave of attacks began. He personally led a team of high-ranking knights to attack. Even more siege weapons launched their attacks. The catapults continuously shot out fireballs, igniting a large number of siege weapons. Archers, far shot. A warrior in full armor drew his sword and shouted. His whole body was covered in armor, and his head was covered with a steel mask. Only his cold and sharp eyes could be seen. Following his order, the archers on the watchtower all knocked their arrows and knocked their arrows. One by one, the bows were pulled back to their maximum. Bang! 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 The dull sound of bowstrings being released rang out. Black clouds rose from the watchtowers and fell on the walls. After these arrows flew to the highest point, they fell at an even faster speed. A large number of rebels in leather armor were shot by these arrows, turning them into porcupines. At the same time, more archers began to counterattack under the cover of their shields. Some heavily armored and shield-wielding soldiers quickly ran up the cloud ladder. These soldiers were nimble and quickly climbed up into the air. The soldiers on the city wall raised their flying stones and smashed them down. A soldier who couldn't dodge in time fell down from the ladder that was more than 10 meters high. The high-ranking knights were like monkeys, jumping to the top of the ladder in a few jumps. Then, they jumped a few meters into the air and directly jumped onto the walls. They swung their swords and killed a few rebels around them. The high-ranking knights in the back quickly climbed up the walls and quickly opened up a place to rest. The soldiers in the back continued to rush up the ladder. At this moment, the high-ranking knights of the rebel army led their men to launch a counterattack. The narrow city wall became extremely chaotic. Every second, someone was killed. Due to the disadvantage in numbers, the Savoy army was constantly pushed back. It looked like they were about to be chased down the walls again. At this moment, a tall figure jumped down from the ladder. The sharp sword in his hand carried a biting cold wind and instantly killed a knight. It was the Marquis of Savoy. Chapter 454. Not good. Crossbowmen. Get into formation. Rows of heavy crossbowmen wearing chainmail armor quickly rushed out and formed 3 rows. The first row sat down, the second row squatted down, and the third row stood up. The heavy crossbows were quickly loaded. More than half of the wall was blocked by these people. The heavy crossbows that required ordinary people to step on were loaded by these people with their hands. They then set up the crossbows and aimed at the Marquis of Savoy who had just rushed up. Seeing that all the crossbowmen were ready, the commander at the side immediately waved his sword and roared, "Fire!" Pang! 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 The sound of bowstrings being released was instantly heard. Bolts shot out like lightning. These people did not care that there were many of their own soldiers in front of the crossbow formation. The Marquis of Savoy's expression changed slightly. He killed the enemy in front of him with his sword, then picked up the soldier's corpse with one hand and used it as a shield. Pang! 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 Dull sounds of impact rang out. The corpse in front of him was instantly shot into a hedgehog. At such a close distance, even a plate could not withstand the barrage of heavy crossbows. After the first wave of crossbow bolts, the Marquis of Savoy used his arm to throw the heavy corpse away. He then took advantage of the time when the crossbowmen were reloading to roar and charge forward. The Marquis of Savoy charged into the formation of crossbowmen like a tiger in a flock of sheep. The crossbowmen around him could not resist at all and were easily killed. Under the Marquis of Savoy's lead, more and more soldiers rushed up. It seemed that this section of the wall would be taken over by them. Curse of weakness. Slow. Stun. Rays of light suddenly lit up, and the Marquis of Savoy's fierce attacks were instantly interrupted. His originally nimble body suddenly became weak, and even his speed slowed down. However, this feeling did not last long. He quickly recovered. Fireball. Frost spear. Lightning fall. Wind shackles. The rays of light from the spells at the front had yet to dissipate. Following that, more rays of light rose up, and one spell after another was thrown at the Marquis of Savoy. High mage armor. Dispel magic. Counterspell. At this moment, a few figures suddenly appeared in mid-air. It was Alex, Karina, and the others. With a flash of light, a protective barrier appeared around Savoy's body. The spells that were flying towards him were immediately dispelled. The wizards who were casting spells turned pale with blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. This was the backlash they received after their spells were disrupted. As fourth-grade spellcasters, the two of them cast flight and invisibility to hide in mid-air, waiting for the sorcerers to make their move. To them, these magi were an entire grade lower than them. They were no match for them. This time, he hit at the side and launched a sneak attack, injuring several magi in an instant. Not good, it's the Grand Magus. The moment the high-grade wizards saw Alex and Karina, their expressions changed drastically. They couldn't care less about the spell backlash and tried to cast teleportation spells to escape. Although there was only a single rank difference between a high-grade wizard and a grand wizard, it was more than enough to kill them. Streaks of spiritual light rose up, and spatial fluctuations appeared. The teleportation spiritual light had already appeared. Dimensional anchor. Just as the teleportation spell was about to take shape, the dimensional anchor instantly marked the few of them under the sorcerer's despairing gazes. The magic aura that had been gathering quickly dissipated in an instant. Group stun. Group human immobilization. Two more spiritual lights rose up, and the magi who had just been disrupted felt dizzy. In the next second, their bodies were controlled. All right, we have taken care of these magi. The rest is up to you. Alex gently waved her arm, and streaks of wind elemental quickly gathered into a wind elemental chain in her hand. The chain danced in the air and quickly tied up the magi. Thank you for your help, Lord Magus. Leave the rest to us. Savoy said respectfully. He then shouted and led the knights to charge forward again. The morale of Savoy's army was boosted when they saw how easily the wizards were taken down. They charged forward without a care for their own safety. As for the rebels who were defending the city, they were scared out of their wits when they saw the wizards they had high hopes for being wiped out. Their morale plummeted, and the defensive line that was barely holding on crumbled instantly. Many of the soldiers threw down their weapons and fled. Seeing this, Savoy was overjoyed. It only took them 2 hours to completely take over the fortress. After taking over the fortress, Marquis Savoy handed the matter over to his generals. He personally thanked Alex and Karina. Alex and Karina greeted him briefly and sent him away. They were now busy interrogating the 5 high-grade magi. Although high-grade magi were not strong in front of them, they were still the backbone of a magus organization. Sulen suspected that there was a magus organization supporting the Burn Kingdom. Karina was very good at interrogating people. It was their traditional skill. Dealing with these magi was a piece of cake. It didn't take long for the adepts to come clean about everything that had happened. These magi were the Burn Kingdom's consecrators. They were specially sent to help defend Coldwind City. In the end, they were all captured by Alex and Karina. At the same time, Karina also learned about the Burn Kingdom situation. The Burn Kingdom had been developing well these past few years. The Burn Kingdom's king's confidence had grown. When he saw the rebellion in the Kingdom of Florence, he wanted to take over Coldwind City. The 5 high-grade magi were all captured, and half of the soldiers were killed. Even Coldwind City could not be saved. It was like trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. As for the other consecrators of the Burn Kingdom, the strongest one was a 4th-grade magus. However, after losing 5 high-grade magi, the Burn Kingdom only had 2 or 3 consecrators left. According to Sulen, he did not plan to kill these captured high-grade magi. Wizards were one of the few high-grade magi in this world. He would be crazy to do that. He planned to make these magi sign a contract and serve him. Alex and Karina set up a temporary teleportation circle and connected it to the Northwind Tower. Powerful elemental fluctuations surrounded it, and the magic circle drawn on the ground slowly lit up. Then, a flash of light appeared, and a teleportation light appeared. Alex controlled the 5 high-grade magi to enter the teleportation circle. They felt dizzy, and in the next second, they appeared in the Magus Tower. This long-distance group teleportation experience is so bad. Alex shook her dizzy head and said. The other magi who teleported with her were even worse. Their faces were pale, and they were vomiting on the ground. It took them a while to recover. Although Alex looked weak, she wasn't a human. Just her physical fitness alone wasn't any weaker than a grand knight. As soon as Alex returned to the North Wind Tower, Surin, who had received the news, hurried over. His eyes lit up when he saw the high-grade wizards. The North Wind Tower was currently lacking a large number of tool wizards, and there were many jobs that the wizard apprentices couldn't do. Now that there were 5 more high-grade wizards, it was just right for them to do it. Thank you for your hard work, Alex. Su Luan hugged Alex's soft body and kissed her. Hee, these people are too stupid. It didn't take much effort. Alex smiled proudly. Sulen reached out and rubbed Alex's head. After a while, I'll give you a gift. A gift? What kind of gift? Alex asked in surprise. Sulen smiled and pinched her nose. It won't be a surprise if I tell you. You will know when the time comes. I promise you won't be disappointed. Stop pinching my nose. Alex said as she dodged Sulen's hand. Alright, let's deal with these magi first. Su Luan let go of Alex, and then let her manipulate these wizards to come to the dungeon in the wizard tower. At the same time, he lifted the human body fixing spell on these wizards, and only tied them up with wind bondage. Let me go. I can pay the ransom. The magi said as soon as he woke up. He let out a sigh of relief. Ransom? I don't need money. Sulen shook his head. Then what do you want? The magi asked in confusion. Hee. You are now my prisoners. Sulen smiled. Sign this contract, and I will let you go. Sulen looked at the magi in front of him with a smile. His squinted eyes made the magi around him feel uneasy. When they saw the content of the contract, the magi's face changed instantly. 100 years? No, I won't sign it. You are treating us like slaves. One of the magi shouted. Yes, 100 years is too long. I won't sign it even if I die. The magi around him shouted. Bang! Sulen slammed the table. You don't want to sign it? You are my prisoners now. Sulen snorted and stretched out his arm. A weapon with lightning flashing appeared in front of them. You have 2 choices now. Sign the contract, or let us send you to meet the Grim Reaper. Sulen said coldly. Facing the storm battle halberd, the magi became more nervous. Lightning flashed around them, and countless lightning snakes slithered back and forth in the air. The magi felt their bodies go numb. It was as if they were going to be killed in the next moment. Ahem, Mr. Magi, we think 100 years is too long. Can you shorten it a little? One of the magi hesitated and said. Chapter 455. Too long. Sulen shook his head. 100 years won't decrease. We're wizards. We're not slaves. You can't do this to us. The wizards were a little agitated. As expected, getting an adept to submit and work like a slave was a very troublesome matter. However, Sulen wasn't disappointed. He silently gave Alex a look. While the wizards were arguing with Sulen, he secretly cast a spell. Telepathy. A faint beam of light rose from Alex's body and quickly enveloped the adepts around him. If you insist, then I have no choice. I'd love to have more people in my wizard tower, but if you don't want to, then I'll have to send you back to the river Styx. Sulen's lips curved up into an evil smile. The storm battle halberd in Abel's hand shone brightly, and the binding of wind chains on these wizards became tighter. Every time they tried to secretly channel their mana to cast a spell, the binding of wind chains would bind them and interrupt their channeling of mana. Seeing the storm battle halberd getting closer and closer, the wizards began to panic. At first, they were calm because Sulan wanted them to work for him. They knew the value of a wizard, so when Sulan asked for 100 years, they knew that Sulan wouldn't give them up. They didn't have to worry about their lives. This was also the reason why they dared to bargain with Suluan as prisoners. However, the situation didn't seem right. They seemed to have made a mistake. It seemed like Sulan really wanted to kill them. I'm still young. I'm a high-grade wizard. I still have a bright future ahead of me. I can't die so easily. I don't want to die. The cold blade had already touched his neck, and the wizard could no longer withstand the pressure. His body trembled as he said, "Stop, stop. Sir, I agree. I agree to your conditions." The storm battle halberd stopped, and the wizard felt a warm liquid dripping down from his neck. It was his own blood. The wizard broke out in a cold sweat when he felt the blood flowing out. Sulan smiled and gently put away the storm battle halberd. He then said with a smile, "Looks like you've thought it through. I like people like you who know what's good for you. Isn't it just 100 years? You have to look at things from both sides. The Northwind Tower doesn't have many people. This is a legendary wizard tower. You're lucky to be working here. Normal high-grade wizards don't even have the qualifications to work here. As for 100 years, it's not a long time for wizards. You can also learn a lot of high-grade spells here without spending a penny. Most of the time, you can't even buy this kind of knowledge with money. All in all, you've made a lot of money this time." Surin patted the shoulders of these high-grade wizards and said. Then he took out a spell contract made by Hathaway from the storage space. The material of this spell contract was the skin of a hydra. Hathaway had made all kinds of terms and conditions, and all of them had been engraved with runes. The terms and conditions on this spell contract were exactly what Sulan had mentioned. After the 5 high-grade wizards looked through it and found no problems, they left their soul imprints on it. Seeing that the 5 of them had signed the contract, Sulan also left his soul imprint on it. After everyone had signed the contract, Sulan snapped his fingers. A ray of light rose, and a blue elemental flame suddenly burned on the spell contract. Soon, the entire contract was devoured by the elemental flame and disappeared completely. In the end, it turned into a ray of light and merged with the bodies of Sulan and the 5 wizards. As soon as the light entered their bodies, it moved to their arms. Finally, a lightning symbol appeared on their arms. This spell contract made from the skin of a hydra and made by Hathaway was very powerful. Even a legendary demon couldn't resist it after signing it, let alone the 5 high-grade wizards in front of him. The power of this contract was not inferior to a soul contract at all. It was even safer. After the contract was completed, Alex also quietly removed the telepathic suggestion spell. Sulan spread out his hands and said with a smile, "Okay, the contract is complete. See, didn't we successfully reach an agreement? Alex, hurry up and remove the magic chains on them. They are our slaves of the North Wind Tower. Tui, they are partners. We can't let them get hurt. We still need them to work." Sulan said enthusiastically to the wizards, Come, get up. The ground is cold. Since you are already one of us, let me tell you about your benefits. First of all, housing. Each of you will have a room of 30 square meters in the Wizard Tower. Every month, you will be allocated some magic materials for experiments. At the same time, the laboratory will be open to you. The first 3 floors of the library in the Wizard Tower will be free of charge. The rest will require the corresponding contribution points. Apart from that, the fees for the seclusion rooms, magic potions, and materials will also be distributed to you in accordance with the regulations. There will be a booklet about your specific benefits in a while, as well as the following obligations you will need to fulfill. Every month, you will need to complete a certain amount of magic enchantment, magic potion refinement, various upgrade and modification plans, rune material production, and so on. Only after all of these are completed will you be able to enjoy the benefits mentioned before. Sullen's eyes swept back and forth across the wizards. He then revealed a sinister smile and continued. I don't think you will ever want to enjoy some of these punishments. In this territory, there is a nest of harpies. Many of them are low-grade harpies in heat. Hearing Sullen's words, the 5 high-grade wizards in front of him shuddered. Their faces instantly turned pale. Hee, cheer up. Don't be so depressed. Isn't it just 100 years? I always abide by the spirit of the contract. Under normal circumstances, I persuade people with reason. Just like just now, didn't we have a pleasant conversation? Sulan brought the 5 high-grade wizards who had just signed a contract to tour the Northwind Tower. Come, let's have a laugh. This is a legendary wizard tower. Soon, Sulan brought them to the control center of the wizard tower. Milky Way, register the permissions for these new employees. A cold mechanical voice sounded, yes, master. Scanning soul waves, please wait. Recording soul information recording complete, registration complete. Default to level F visitor permissions. Master, please confirm their permissions. Give them level D permissions then. Sulan said directly. Permissions upgraded. Current permissions to level D. Milky Way's cold mechanical voice sounded again. After checking that there were no problems, Sulan turned to the high-grade wizards and said, all right, the permissions have been arranged for you. Now, you can go and familiarize yourself with the wizard tower and your own permissions. I'll give you a break for today. From tomorrow onwards, you will officially start working. Looking at the 5 high-grade wizards in front of him, Sulan only felt refreshed. Such good leaks. He could harvest them continuously for 100 years. With their talent, 100 years was more than enough for them to level up to a level 4 wizard. Sulan only needed to pay a very low price to get 5 high-quality, cheap laborers. From the day they met, 007 was their daily life. It was not impossible for them to take another step forward. After all, with the strength of a wizard, it was completely possible for them to withstand it. With these 5 cheap laborers, the production of magic potions and magic tools in the northern town would greatly increase. When it came to the exploitation of labor, the most famous was the liches. Those liches would not only make you work while you were alive, but even if you were dead, they would also use spells to revive you and continue to work for them. 007 was simply too weak. There was no rest, no holidays, and no need to eat. He had to work 24 hours a day. Even the capitalists in the previous world would shed tears for him. Looking at the contracts on their bodies, the 5 unnamed high-grade wizards wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Just like that, they had sold the rest of their lives. They looked at Sulan and then looked at Alex beside him. It was said that there was a legendary wizard in the wizard tower. The high-grade wizard's heart sank. At the same time, they told themselves that they were men. A great wizard knew when to yield and when to stand tall. Even a giant dragon could endure the humiliation of being under its crotch and become the mount of a dragon knight. Their contract of 100 years was nothing. It was just 100 years. They just had to endure it. Also, the concentration of elemental energy here was so high. Every breath of air was as sweet as milk. Every cell in their body was greedily sucking in the elemental particles around them. This environment was so good. With the rich elemental energy, it might be a good choice to work here. After coming to the seclusion room, the high-grade wizard suddenly had an idea after feeling the rich elemental energy. Maybe things are not as bad as I thought. There's also the knowledge in the library. As a legendary wizard, the books in his library will not disappoint me. If I join such a powerful organization, at least I won't have to worry about safety and all kinds of magic knowledge in the future. Chapter 456. After arranging the 5 tools, Sulen no longer paid any attention to them. The tasks for these tools were already set. From tomorrow onwards, Milky Way would give them all sorts of tasks. Enjoy these last moments of leisure. The materials obtained from the brain hunters were made into magic tools by Hathaway. The skin of the brain hunters was made into a leather armor. The leather armor was made by Grace herself. In the northern town, the half-elf Grace's tailoring skills were the best. In order to make this leather armor, Hathaway spent a lot of materials. Just the runic circle on the leather armor used 5 ounces of mithril and 1 ounce of astral sand. She also used 3 high-quality magic gems to make this leather armor. Hathaway named this leather armor, Deathwalker. This leather armor was already considered a legendary magic tool. It could be Sulen's most powerful magic tool other than the Storm War Halberd. Deathwalker, leather armor, quality, legendary, material, brain hunter's skin, mithril, etc. This is a legendary leather armor made from brain hunter's skin that was meticulously sewn by a master tailor. It has powerful defense and unimaginable magical effects. Defense plus 35, magic resistance plus 50, evasion plus 10, agility plus 3, special effect, immune to mind control, special skill, alternate space travel, 3/day, mind attack, 1/day, Deathwalker, was a very powerful equipment. Although it was a leather armor, it had better defense than a plate armor. It also had strong elemental resistance. According to Hathaway's tests, spells with less than 50 damage would not cause any damage to him. One must know that the fireball spell only had 35 damage. At the same time, this leather armor also strengthened his resistance. Because it was made from the skin of a brain hunter, this leather armor was immune to mind control. It could be said that this attribute was its most powerful attribute. In future battles, Sulen would not have to worry about mind control spells. In addition to these, this leather armor also increased evasion and agility. It also had some of the brain hunter's special characteristics, space travel. Although it wasn't as powerful as the original brain hunter, it was still pretty good. As long as it could see a place, it could instantly pass through. In addition, this leather armor also had the mental attack of the brain hunter. Since the brain hunter was dead, the effect of its mental attack was greatly reduced, and the brain-sucking effect was impossible. However, the mental attack was still there. It could launch a mental attack on an enemy, and if successful, it would stun the enemy for 2 seconds. Of course, other than these attributes, the most important thing about this leather armor was that it was very cool. Grace's intense tailoring skills were vividly displayed on this leather armor. The effect of this leather armor was godly for any close combat profession. It would also increase Sulen's strength. Sulen did not hesitate and directly put it on. This leather armor could be said to be the best magical equipment in this batch of equipment. Hathaway did not waste the remaining materials. In addition to this leather armor, there was still some brain hunter's skin left. The skin was damaged in the eye area, so it could not be made into large equipment. Hathaway used the skin to make 2 pairs of gloves. The effects of these gloves were not bad. After wearing it, it did not affect the flexibility of the fingers at all. At the same time, it could also protect the palm. Moreover, because the skin was originally near the brain hunter's eyes, there was an alternate space that originally stored the brain. This was also left behind by Hathaway and added other materials to expand it. Finally, each pair of gloves had an alternate space of 1 cubic meter that could be used to store items. Dark Night Gloves, high magic item, material, brain witcher skin, void stone, orichalcum. This is a pair of gloves made from the skin of a brain witcher, a decent magic item, defense plus 15, magic resistance plus 40, hand only, agility plus 23, attack speed plus 8, strength plus 5, special effect, dimensional space. Su Len used one pair of gloves and gave the other pair to Phyllis. To be honest, this equipment did not increase his strength by much, but it was still a good equipment. The remaining Brain Hunter's eyes were also very good materials. Many of the Brain Hunter's magical abilities and psychic abilities were used by the Brain Hunter's eyes. Therefore, the Brain Hunter's eyes had a special magic power. After the Brain Hunter's eyes were taken out of its body and soaked in a special potion, they would become as hard as gemstones and looked very beautiful. The Brain Hunter had 7 eyes on its body, and the rest of its eyes were completely destroyed by the particle cannon. The remaining 7 eyeballs were also made into magical equipment. This kind of gemstone was usually made into a necklace or ring. Hathaway made 3 rings and 4 necklaces. Su Len looked at the attributes and found that they were not bad. Dark Knight Necklace, high-rank magic item, material, eye, orichalcum, mithril. This necklace is made from the eye of a Brain Hunter and has a mystical effect. Vision plus 5, charm plus 3, magic resist plus 15, magic resist plus 20, spirit resist plus 15, additional skills, mind control plus 1/day, eye of truth, permanent. The necklace came with 2 spells. One of them, mind control, could be used to control a unit that was not higher than the user's own level. It could be used on humans or monsters, but it was ineffective on legendary creatures. If the target's mental resistance was successful and the mind control failed, the target would also be stunned for 1 second. It could be said that this spell was very good for controlling people or stunning enemies. The other skill, True Eye, was also good. Its effect was to see through most of the magic effects such as illusions, stealth, shadow travel, and invisibility. It was very effective against those who liked to sneak attack. Of course, if the opponent's magic was too high, True Eye might not be able to detect it. Dark Gaze, high magic item, material, eye, adamantine, mithril. This is a ring made with the eye of a Brain Hunter. Do you feel like you are being stared at by the Grim Reaper when you look at it? Vision plus 3, charm plus 2, magic resistance plus 18, magic power plus 20, spirit resistance plus 15, night vision plus 30, intimidation plus 10. Additional skills, death gaze plus 1/day, spirit intimidation plus 1/day. The ring also had 2 additional spells. Among them, Death Gaze was a spell that completely depended on one's luck. Death Gaze was an instant death spell. After this spell hit the target, it would go through a constitution and soul test. If the test failed, it would directly activate the effect of instant death. If the test passed, it would not cause any damage. Of course, it also had another function, which was to instantly kill targets with low vitality. This skill was called Lucky Emperor's Unlucky Detector. If the luck was good, it would directly send the target away. If the luck was bad, it would have no effect. In addition to this skill, the ring also had a mind intimidation skill. After using it, it would cause a mind shock to enemies within 20 yards. If the immunity failed, these people would be stunned for 3 seconds. If the test passed, it would cause 30 points of damage. In addition to these effects, the necklace and ring also had the effect of Eagle Eye. The equipment's vision bonus was almost 80% of Eagle Eye's range. Moreover, this effect was constant. It was basically a buff of Eagle Eye. Su Len planned to give these 4 necklaces to Chris, Hathaway, Alex, and Phyllis. As for the ring, it was the same. Because there were only 3 rings, Phyllis already had a pair of gloves, so there was no ring. As for the remaining sharp claws and tentacles of the Brain Hunters, they were also collected by Hathaway. The Brain Hunters' thighs were very good materials for spears. The spears made of these materials were incomparably sharp and had strong penetrating power. Hathaway planned to make them later. Su Len didn't use the remaining tentacles. These tentacles were a relatively rare material in many dark magic potions books. Some people even wanted to use them to make potions, but these potions had very strong side effects. Sulen wouldn't use these potions. Of course, he could make them and sell them to others. He would keep these magic tools and send them to them when he had the time. After making these magic tools, Hathaway continued to study the knowledge of riddles. Northwind Tower was still not a complete wizard tower. One of the key problems was its defense. There were several types of defense in a wizard tower. The first type was some spell traps outside the wizard tower. Although they were simple, they were very effective. The second type was the wizard tower's own defense. Because most of the materials used in the wizard tower were obsidian and enchanted with hardening, the hardening effect was very good. Not only did it have strong defense, but it also had strong magic resistance. In the face of this kind of building, ordinary spells were basically useless. The fireball spell only blackened the wall and didn't even break the wall. The third type of defense was the enigma or magic barrier. Now that the first two defenses of the Northwind Tower had been completed, only the third enigma was left to research. The magic barrier was actually the initial stage of the enigma. The enigma was actually a powerful construct that integrated both attack and defense. The people in the enigma would also receive bonuses and have skills. The first enigma was made by the High Elves with the help of divine power. It could easily cover a forest or a city. The initial enigma technology of humans was far inferior to that of the elves. However, during the Arcane Empire, it was improved and optimized by the Arcanists and successfully created an enigma that could cover a city. From that moment on, the enigma became the standard of the floating city. Chapter 457. During the most glorious period of the Arcane Empire, large riddles were not only used for defense, but also for attack. There was a period of time when the highest defense command of the High Elves' riddles was, if a true dragon enters the range, automatically release the stored high-level spell sequence to attack the target. During that period, the dragons ran amok in the multiverse, and the High Elves were barely surviving under their influence. The Elves and the Arcanists had basically the same definition of enigma. It was a masterpiece of high-level magic skills, woven with magical energy. It was a powerful enchantment that covered an extremely wide area. It had a simple consciousness of its own, and it was a permanent enchantment or domain created by legendary spells. There were four main functions of riddles. The first was a protective enchantment. The riddles had a powerful protective enchantment, which was used to protect the area inside the riddles from outside the riddles. The second was a spell enchantment. This spell enchantment could be activated or deactivated automatically, and the target could be chosen. However, this spell usually would not be activated continuously. After all, the magic consumption was too high. The riddles created by the ancient High Elves could be activated for a long time because they once controlled a spell energy source. The riddles created by the Arcanists had this effect after they had the mice energy core. The third was a forbidden spell. Within the range of the riddles, you could not use spells that were forbidden by the riddles. This was actually equivalent to a ban on magic. The fourth was a spell sequence. This was a spell that was stored in the riddles in advance. The spell could be activated by using specific gestures or specific words. There was no limit to the number of times the spell could be activated. Of course, the maker of the riddles could limit the number of times it could be activated to reduce the cost of the effect. There was a limit to the number of times the spell could be used, and it could only be activated a few times in 24 hours. The fifth was a permanent effect. This effect could not be directly described by a spell. It could only be divided into 3 levels. The primary effect was equivalent to a level 1 to level 3 spell or a low-level magical item. The intermediate effect was equivalent to a level 4 to level 6 spell or a mid-level magical item. The advanced effect was equivalent to a level 7 to level 9 spell or a high-level magical item. Hathaway had more or less mastered the puzzle technology, but it was still a bit difficult to make a complete puzzle. Making a puzzle required the cooperation of several legendary wizards. It was too much work to do with just one legendary wizard. Hathaway was the only legendary wizard in northern Battlefront City. She would have to take it slow. There were a few grand wizards in northern Battlefront City, but other than Alex, Karina, and Grace were all more inclined towards becoming legendary wizards. It would not be easy for them to become legendary wizards. As for the succubus Chrissy, she was also a wizard, so there was no hope for her. Just like Hathaway, Alex was a wizard and a sorcerer. However, compared to Hathaway, Alex's knowledge was not as solid. After all, she lived in the underground world and had little contact with the outside world. All her knowledge was inherited from her bloodline. It was only after she came to Northern Town City that she began to systematically learn all kinds of spells. If she wanted to master the riddle-weaving technique, she would have to wait until she became a legendary wizard. There was a special legendary spell for riddle-weaving. This spell needed to be made according to one's own ideas. The High Elves had far more talent than humans, but they still could not avoid the fate of decline. Their bloodline ability began to degenerate for unknown reasons. The former Elven Empire also fell apart. When the Elven Empire declined, humans began to rise. Before the rise of humans, the languages needed to cast spells were the ancient Elven language, dragon language, celestial language, demon language, and so on. However, after generations of human sages, they finally succeeded in replacing them with human language. It was these people who started the glory of human magic, the era of the Arcane Empire. Hathaway did not make a puzzle after she mastered the method of making one. After all, making a puzzle was a huge project, and it required the cooperation of many legendary wizards. The riddles built by the ancient arcanists were all built by a large number of arcanists. If it was a small puzzle that only covered a range of 100 or 200 meters, Hathaway could still build it with some time. However, the Northwind Tower was going to be upgraded into a floating space tower and a floating space city. Such a small puzzle was naturally not suitable. Hathaway temporarily put the puzzle making on hold and began to study some other information brought back by Sulan, elemental fission and elemental fusion. The earliest research on this technology was in the early days of the Arcane Empire. At that time, the Arcanists wanted to find a way to provide more energy sources. This technology brought about a new energy core, the elemental furnace. The energy provided by the elemental furnace was hundreds or even thousands of times more than the energy provided by the elemental pool of the same volume. However, this technology was soon replaced by a new technology, the mice energy nucleus. The mice energy nucleus could provide a huge amount of energy in a clean and stable manner, even more than the energy provided by elemental fission. Thus, the elemental furnace technology was sealed. The mice energy nucleus made the glorious era of the Arcane Empire. However, the mice energy nucleus technology was mastered by the great arcanists, and it involved the gods. The mice energy nucleus required the help of the magic net to obtain almost endless energy. After the Arcane Empire and the gods went to war, this kind of thing was naturally not made anymore. After that, the Arcanists dug out the technology of elemental fission and elemental fusion from the pile of old papers. They wanted to make a more powerful elemental furnace to replace the mice energy nucleus. The theoretical knowledge of elemental fission had been around for a long time, but it was very difficult to turn the theory into reality. It was not difficult to detonate the energy all at once, but it was difficult to control the energy and release it steadily and continuously. If one was not careful and released it too quickly, it would no longer be an elemental furnace. It would be a catastrophe. It would be easy to destroy a city, so one had to be very careful. Elemental fusion was more difficult than elemental fission, and the energy released was thousands of times more than elemental fission. If elemental fusion was successfully mastered and the elemental furnace for elemental fusion was made, the energy core for building a large floating city would be directly solved. Elemental fusion had many advantages compared to elemental fission. Elemental fusion was almost pollution-free, while elemental fission had strong radiation pollution. However, the difficulty of achieving elemental fusion was not ordinary. With the current technical reserves of the North Wind Tower, there was still a long way to go before they could master elemental fusion. In addition to the elemental furnace technology, Hathaway began to try to repair the high-grade legendary golem Sulen brought back from the desert ruins. The strongest golem in the North Wind Tower was the steel golem, which was seriously inconsistent with the identity of a legendary wizard. If a legendary wizard did not have a few legendary golems, he would be embarrassed to go out and say hello to others. In addition to the precious materials to make a legendary golem, legendary soul crystals were also needed as the soul core of the golem. Sulen still had a few pieces of legendary soul crystals, which were enough to make a few legendary golems. Making a legendary golem required a lot of materials, including a lot of precious metals. If the North Wind Tower did not control the underground world and had a lot of mineral support, they would have gone bankrupt long ago. A stone golem cost 100,000 kinnar, an obsidian gargoyle cost 150,000 kinnar, and a steel golem cost 500,000 kinnar. As for the legendary golem, Sulen estimated that it would cost 3 to 5 million kinnar. Even Sulen felt a little pained at this price. As the saying went, a powerful wizard's power was like throwing money at people. North Wind Tower, Astrology Platform. Sulen and Hathaway were researching the elemental furnace together. They had long mastered the theory of elemental fission, and now the two were trying to design the blueprint of an elemental fission energy core. Suddenly, Milky Way's voice could be heard. "Master. Madam Chris has something important to report to you." "Let her in," Sulen said without raising his head. "Yes, Master." As soon as the voice fell, the tightly shut door of the laboratory slowly opened, and the little succubus Chris walked in. "What happened, Chris?" Sulen put down his notebook and got up to greet her. "Master, I just received news that the Grey Dwarves found a gold mine when they were exploring. There's adamantine inside," Chris said excitedly. "Adamantine?" Sulen's eyes lit up. It turned out to be a fine gold ore, which was no less valuable than mithril. Part of the fine gold used in the North Town city was Sulen's reward, and the other part was purchased with money. The quantity was seriously insufficient. He didn't expect to find a fine gold ore this time. The underground world was rich in resources. "Hathaway, I have something to do, so I have to leave. You'll have to design the elemental fission yourself," Sulen said as he turned around. "Go. I can finish the blueprint by myself," Hathaway said without raising her head. Sulen put away the documents and left the laboratory with Chris. "Did you calculate the amount of gold you found?" Sulen asked. "Not yet. According to the Grey Dwarves who found the gold mine, the area around the gold mine is occupied by other monsters. They can't get too close." Chris did not know much. When she heard that adamantine had been found, she immediately came to tell Sulen. "A while ago, there was a small earthquake in the underground world, but it didn't cause too many casualties. Only some of the mines collapsed, and there weren't many casualties. However, after the earthquake, we found a new tunnel. The gold mine was found in the underground cave behind the tunnel." Chapter 458. Sulen and Chris left the Northwind Tower and arrived at the underground world through the teleportation portal. They felt a slight dizziness, and the light dimmed. The two appeared at the teleportation portal in Crete. After a few months of development, the appearance of Crete had changed greatly. Thousands of kobold slaves, grey dwarves, and taurens were all busy. In order to obtain labor, Crazy had captured all the kobold tribes nearby. Now, the underground world had a huge mining team of 20 to 30,000 people. Although the kobolds were not as efficient as the grey dwarves, their numbers could easily make up for it. "Where is the grey dwarf who found the gold mine?" Su Len asked as he sat in the hall. "Please wait a moment, master. I've already sent someone to inform him," a grey dwarf said respectfully. Soon, Su Len saw a muscular grey dwarf about 1.4 meters tall enter the hall. The grey dwarf was wearing old leather armor. His palms were thick with calluses, and he had a thick beard. "Were you the one who found the gold mine and the fine gold mine?" Su Len asked directly. "My lord, I was the one who found the gold mine and the fine gold mine," the grey dwarf said respectfully. At the same time, he took out a piece of ore that reflected a metallic luster from his pouch. "These are some samples of the ore I found in the vein." The grey dwarf held up the ore with both hands. Chris walked over and took it, then handed it to Su Len. Su Len weighed it lightly. It was heavy in his hand. There was a golden metal in the rock. It was gold. Beside the gold, there was another piece of metal that shone brighter. Su Len snapped his fingers, and a spiritual light rose from his body. It instantly merged with the ore in his hand. After a while, his eyes flashed with joy. "It really is fine gold. Very good. You will be rewarded handsomely." With that, Su Len snapped his fingers, and with a flash of light, a wine barrel that was 1.2 meters tall appeared on the ground. It was filled with vodka, a specialty of Northern Town City. "This is only a small part of the reward for you. Next, take us to see the gold mine. If everything is true, the reward will be given immediately," Su Len said with a smile. "As long as you make a contribution, I will not be stingy with the reward." "Thank you, my lord." "Thank you, my lord." As soon as the barrel appeared, the grey dwarf's eyes were instantly attracted to it. He sniffed with his red nose, as if he was going to pounce on it in the next second. "It's yours." Su Len snickered and snapped his fingers. With a flash of light, the lid of the wine barrel was opened. The rich aroma of wine spread out and the fragrant wine slowly flowed out. At the same time, a glass cup happened to catch the wine. Soon, a glass of vodka was filled. Su Luen handed the glass to the grey dwarf who had been scratching his head for a long time. The grey dwarf took the glass and took a big gulp. Gulp, gulp, gulp. He drank half of the large glass in one go. Su Len smiled. He did not overly oppress these Duergar. Instead, he used good wine and food to entice them, and then supplemented it with force. As for the Duergar's upper class, he had Chris directly control them, and they were easily under his control. After drinking vodka, the Duergar's original wine became tasteless. If they wanted to drink vodka, they could only work hard and use their points or money to buy it. This method was much better than the previous oppressive slavery, and the Duergar did not betray or riot. Burp. The Duergar burped in satisfaction, and his face became flushed. "My lord, the gold mine is very wide. I can guarantee that there is a gold mine hidden in it." The Duergar raised his voice and said exaggeratedly, "There is a lot of adamantine in it. Its value is immeasurable." Su Len nodded slightly. He did not completely believe the Duergar's words. Duergars, like their cousins on the surface, liked to boast. Speaking of which, it seemed that all the small people in this world had this hobby. Halflings, dwarves, gnomes, these people all had a habit of boasting. It was better to just take their words at face value. The truth should be at least half of what they said. "Get ready. We will set off tomorrow for the newly discovered gold mine." Su Len ordered, "Oh, and don't let him drink too much today. Otherwise, he will be drunk tomorrow." "Yes, master. I will arrange it right away." Chris nodded and said. It was already late, and all kinds of preparations had not been made, so they could only wait until tomorrow to set off. The gold mine would not run away, so there was no need to be too anxious. There were many monsters in the underground world. Sulen and the others had to bring enough people to deal with them when they set off tomorrow. The little succubus was very capable. After Sulen gave the order, she immediately arranged everything properly. Night fell. Sulen stood on the balcony of the Northwind Tower and looked down at the city below him. The construction of Northtown was still going on. The people who had migrated from all over the world were working hard with hope for a better life. The requirements of ordinary people were very simple. They only wanted a stable environment, a warm home, and a relatively wealthy life through their own efforts. The taverns and night markets in the city were brightly lit. The bustling noises were blown away by the night wind and finally dissipated in the darkness. Although it had only been established for less than 3 years, the development of Northern Town City was very fast. Now, there was even a night market here. However, the night market wasn't open all night. It would close around 11 p.m. However, the appearance of the night market also showed the prosperity of Northtown. In Sulen's design, the city below him was actually a part of the floating city. The various wonders in the city would also be covered by the floating city. There were too many problems to consider in the construction of the floating city. Sulen wanted to build a floating city that could not only wander in the prime material plane, but also had to build a floating city with the ability to travel in the astral plane. Such a floating city could be completely self-sufficient even in the astral plane. It could float in the astral plane for hundreds or even thousands of years without having to worry about logistics. The floating city's population was about 50,000. At the same time, it also needed to control the population growth. The construction of houses also needed to save as much land as possible. Sulen planned to build the residential area according to the residential areas in his previous life. It did not need to be too tall. A building with 6 floors would be enough. There were also commercial areas, workshops, production areas, hospitals, city halls, plantations, ecological parks, simulation systems, wizard academies, golem workshops, entertainment areas, and so on. According to the drawings designed by Sulen, such a floating city could live up to 70 to 100,000 people. 50,000 people could live there even after reproduction. He did not want to have a population expansion problem in a short period of time. A floating city of this level was already very large. In the era of the Arcane Empire, the energy core of such a floating city was the mice energy core. Elemental fission could only support a floating city of 10,000 people. Only elemental fusion and the mice energy core could support a floating city of 100,000 people. Every time the floating city expanded a little, the energy consumed would increase by a lot. Just like a city of 10,000 people and 100,000 people, although the area only increased by a few times, the energy consumed increased by hundreds or thousands of times. In the Arcane Empire, there were super-floating cities that could accommodate more than 300,000 people. The energy core in them was more than one mice energy core. Floating cities of that level were frighteningly powerful. But these were things for the future. The Tower of the North Wind was not even a floating tower, and it was even further away from a floating city. Now, they could only seize the time to climb the technology tree and cultivate talents. In a floating city, at least a few legendary wizards and high-ranking legendaries were needed. Sulen stood quietly on the balcony and watched everything. After a while, he turned around and returned to his room. Nothing happened that night. Early the next morning, Sulen got up from the slender arms and legs of Chrissy and his 2 personal maids. He washed up briefly, woke Chrissy up, and went to the underground world. When they arrived in Crete again, the exploration team was already ready. In addition to Sulen and Chrissy, the exploration team also had a team of Grey Dwarf warriors and a team of drows. There were a total of 24 people in the team. When everyone was there, Sulen asked the miner who found the gold mine to lead the way. The underground world was rich in minerals. Minerals such as gold and adamantine were basically in the depths of the earth. After all, they were originally heavy, and it was difficult to mine adamantine in the surface world. After a period of development, the roads around Crete had been repaired. Although they were not as flat and wide as North City, they were not bad. All of them had dark vision and were completely unaffected in such an environment. The group kept moving along the road. After about an hour, the road began to become rugged, and some underground creatures appeared around them. After discovering the group, they all hid. There were rugged rocks around the road, and there were many broken stones piled up in many places, which should have been caused by the last earthquake. The roads in the underground world were winding and rugged, and it was easy for people who were not familiar with them to get lost. Fortunately, both the Grey Dwarf and the Drows were very familiar with the underground world. Sulen also recorded the route on his strategic map. Under the lead of the Grey Dwarf, the group soon came near a broken rock wall. There was a 3-meter-wide crack in the rock wall. It was dark inside the crack, which looked like a ferocious monster's mouth. After coming here, the Grey Dwarf became a little cautious. "Lord, this is the passage. After passing through this passage, you will reach the cave where the gold mine is." Chapter 459. Aiden, take the Drows to investigate. Be careful of the monsters here. Sulen looked at the crack in front of him and said, "Yes, sir." Aiden nodded, then took a few Drows and directly blended into the darkness. After entering the passage, because there was no fluorescent moss, the light was even dimmer, and the road was even more rugged. Many places could barely allow one person to pass through. And from time to time, some monster corpses could be seen along the way. Some of these monsters were ordinary beasts, and some were mutant creatures. But for these Drows, there was basically no difference. Aiden was now a peak grade 4 Drow, and the rest of the Drows were also elites. It was not difficult to deal with these monsters. After walking in the narrow passage for about 15 minutes, as they went deeper into the underground space, the passage became wider and wider, and some fluorescent moss appeared in the passage again. "Sir, we found some traces of underground orcs here." Aiden's figure emerged from the shadows. As a ranger, Aiden had a good tracking ability. There was not much difference between the underground orcs and the surface orcs. Just like the surface dwarves and grey dwarves, they were cousins, but closer. The underground orcs were stronger than the surface orcs. The general radiation in the underground world had caused some mutations in their bodies. Their bodies had become stronger, and their height had reached 2-3 meters. But because of the radiation, they were more ferocious and brutal than their cousins. These underground orcs did not produce anything. They relied on plundering to survive. They were intelligent creatures that ate humans. They were also notorious in the underground world. The underground orcs almost had the combat power of a knight when they reached adulthood. They generally operated in small groups. The underground orcs were not laborers for free. They had a physique of 2-3 meters and were very powerful. They were very good candidates for mining or building roads. As for their violent personalities, the traditional training skills of the Drows would teach them to work hard. If they really could not do it, they could be thrown to Chrissy. The little succubus's enchantment could even control the Tauren, let alone these orcs. Don't worry about them for now. Finding the gold mine is more important. Sulen scanned the strategic map and said, "After finding the gold mine, we'll clean up the surrounding monsters. As for the orcs, we'll catch them as coolies." In just a few seconds, Sulen had decided the fate of these underground orcs. When they arrived here, the width of the passage was already about 10 meters. There were also several wide underground caverns connecting the passage. Some mushrooms and plants grew very luxuriantly in the caverns. The water vapor in the air was also relatively high. Obviously, there was an underground river in the surroundings. In the damp corners of the passage, there were many underground moss and underground mushrooms. Many of the plants here were poisonous. Because of the radiation environment, there were many special magical plants growing in the underground world. Every once in a while, the wizards of the Northern Wind Tower would come here to collect some magic herbs. The potions produced by the North Wind Tower were very popular in the northern lands, but the quantity was limited. The apprentices in the northern town were so busy that their feet barely touched the ground. They had to process large amounts of ingredients every day. During this period of time, the North Wind Tower had gained another 5 high-grade wizards. The production of potions had increased by quite a bit, but the supply still could not meet the demand. Creatures are approaching. A rustling sound came from the darkness. Sullen's footsteps stopped. Aiden immediately hid in the darkness with the other drows. Soon, there was the sound of a battle, followed by a scream. This scream was like a signal. Soon, the screams came one after another. A few minutes later, all the drows returned to the team. There were no wounds on their bodies, only a strong smell of blood and a faint murderous aura. Aiden bowed to Sulen and said, "Master, it's a group of claw horrors. They've all been wiped out." Sulen nodded and said, "Let's move on." The leading grey dwarf quickly stepped forward. When he passed by Aiden and the others, he subconsciously dodged to the side. It was obvious that he was afraid of these drows. After walking out of the passage, the group came to a huge underground cave. After arriving here, Sulen quickly saw some exposed ores. There were very few of them, and they did not seem to be of high quality. However, since there were ores here, it meant that there was indeed a vein of ore here. It was just that he was not sure what kind of ore this vein was. Sulen asked the grey dwarf next to him to collect some ores. Under the light of the torch, the ores shone with a golden light and looked shiny. As the pickaxe fell, gravel splashed everywhere. Soon, a grey dwarf dug out the ore and respectfully presented it to Sulen. The grey dwarf handed over a golden octahedral ore and said excitedly, "Master, this should be a piece of pyrite, also known as fool's gold." Sulen looked at the pyrite in front of him with some surprise. With this kind of metallic luster, it was really difficult to tell that this thing was pyrite and not gold ore. Pyrite was a kind of granular mineral with a golden luster. Its appearance was very similar to gold ore, so it was also known as fool's gold. In the face of this kind of metal, even some old miners were often fooled by it. Reaching out and picking up the pyrite, Sulen found that some of the metal particles were in a very regular cubic shape, as if they had been specially polished by humans. This was the difference between pyrite and gold ore. Seeing this fool's gold, Sulen was not angry. Instead, he was a little happy. There was a famous saying among the dwarves, "Fool's gold can only fool the fool, not the wise." Although this metal was not gold, it was the tracer of gold. When the dwarves were excavating all kinds of minerals, they found that fool's gold often appeared in the same area as gold. This meant that as long as fool's gold was found, there was a 70% chance of finding gold near the vein. Therefore, in the eyes of the experienced miners, as long as they found fool's gold, they could often follow the vine to find the melon. Now that Sulen and the others found pyrite here, it meant that there was indeed gold ore around, and that the grey dwarf was not lying. "Since we found fool's gold, the real gold is not far away." Sulen threw the pyrite away and continued, "Let's go, hurry up and find the gold." Squeak, squeak, squeak. A chaotic sound like that of insects came from afar, and the faces of the grey dwarves changed. "Master, this is the cry of Nell beetles. They must have been alerted by the commotion when we were mining," Aiden said as he walked up. "Master, Nell beetles usually live in groups. Should we avoid them?" Aiden said as he looked around. Sulen shook his head and rejected Aiden's suggestion. What kind of joke was this? How could he reject a mount that had been delivered to his doorstep? Nell beetles were large beetles that had inherited the social life of insects. Usually, a nest of Nell beetles would have 50 of them. Under normal circumstances, Nell beetles would have a hard bright red carapace, and their defense would be very high. Without any preparation, even the grey dwarves and drows, who were experts in the underground world, would not dare to provoke them. The Nell beetle's 2 evil claws swayed in front of its 4 black round eyes and huge, jagged jaws. There was also a horny protrusion on its head that was similar to a trumpet. This protrusion would release a sound wave that could be used to attack or heal. A single Nell beetle had a challenge level of 10, but when the Nell beetles hit in large numbers, even a knight commander or a conferred knight would have to retreat. These monsters had an innate ability, earthquake. They could make use of sound waves to cause the ground to shake and deform. To Sulen, this ability made use of the resonance effect. There was no need for them to use a lot of strength. As long as the frequency of the sound waves was the same as that of the surrounding ground, they would be able to easily cause the ground to shake and deform. If there were a sufficient number of Nell beetles, they could even cause a small-scale earthquake. In the underground world, almost no one would take the initiative to provoke a group of Nell beetles. However, even though the Nell beetle was powerful, its intelligence was extremely low. It was almost no different from other insects. In fact, its intelligence was even lower than other insects. This situation made it possible for Nell beetles to be tamed. However, from the looks of it, there had not been any underground race that had successfully tamed them. "They're here." A flash of lightning flashed in Sullen's eyes. The moment he said that, the rocks on the ground suddenly bulged up. Then a huge creature with a red carapace that looked like a beetle with 4 legs appeared before everyone. It had 2 sharp pincers, a huge mouth filled with fangs, and a horn on its head. Its body was covered with a shackling carapace, and its diameter was over 1 meter. It looked very ferocious and terrifying. "Sir, be careful." The moment the Nell beetle appeared, Aiden blocked in front of Sulen. A sharp curved sword appeared in his hand, and he looked at the big guy in front of him with vigilance. "Chris, control them," Sulen ordered. Compared to the Magi's ability to control monsters, Chris's charm was more useful. After being strengthened, the effect of her charm talent was very powerful. Chris laughed delicately as a leather whip appeared in her hand. She tapped her toes lightly and leaped into the air. A pair of demonic wings appeared behind her back. Chris's figure gracefully streaked across the air. The leather whip in her hand carried a ball of lightning as it lashed at the Nell beetle. The lightning flashed through the beetle's body and the attacking Nell beetle's body suddenly stopped. Kelly didn't stop at all. She quickly flew backward and the whip in her hand lashed out at even more Nell beetles. Chapter 460. Painful Lash. Charm. Pleasure Whip. As Chris flew past them, all the Nell beetles became stiff. Streaks of pink light quickly spread from Chris's body and quickly enveloped the Nell beetles. A shocking charm power spread from Chris's body. "Don't look at her." Aiden's expression changed drastically. He immediately closed his eyes and turned around. The drows and durgars around him also quickly turned around. Although Chrissy's charm wasn't targeted at them, it still had a very powerful effect on them. Whether it was Eden, the drows, or the grey dwarves, none of them had the confidence to resist this ability. Only Sulen could resist Chris's shocking charm. As the pink light flashed past, the dozen Nell beetles below were instantly controlled by Hathaway. The 16 Nell beetles obediently formed a neat formation under Chris's command. "Master, they're all under control." The little succubus Chris obediently landed beside Sulen and said. Only then did the durgars and drows around Sulen open their eyes in fear. They turned around and looked at Chris with eyes full of fear. How long had it been? In the blink of an eye, those troublesome Nell beetles were easily controlled by her. If the maid was so powerful, then how powerful was the master? At this moment, both the Drows and the Durgars had a deeper understanding of Sullen's powerful strength. Sulen affectionately reached out and patted Chris's head, encouraging her. The little maid had done well during this period of time. She needed to be caressed and praised. With over a dozen death knell beetles, Su Luan's group was able to move about more easily. The death knell beetles were strong and had thick carapaces on their bodies. Their speed was not slow either. They looked like tanks. These knell beetles had many other uses. Not only could they be used as mounts, but they could also be used to transport goods. The roads in the underground world were rugged, but the knell beetles could move as if they were walking on flat ground. They could quickly transport goods and had many uses. If these knell beetles were used to form a knight regiment, not many armies could stop their charge. Even if there were sturdy city walls, they would still collapse under the earth-quaking mountain. Sulen was already considering forming a knight regiment of knell beetles to give it a try. With these knell beetles as mounts, Sulen and the others moved much faster. Many of the monsters they encountered along the way avoided them when they saw the knell beetles. Some stubborn ones were directly torn in half by the knell beetles' ferocious pincers. "My lord, I've explored this area when I came last time. There's a group of kobolds in this passage. There are about 1,000 of them, and there's even a dragon-born kobold warlock among them. There are some undead creatures in this passage. I was almost killed by the spirits there last time," the Grey Dwarf said with lingering fear. "But those spirits and zombies can't leave this place. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to escape." The underground passage extended in all directions, and they encountered several forks along the way. Other than the underground orcs and kobolds, there were also some minotaurs living here. However, there were not many minotaurs, only about 30 of them. There were no cities of grey dwarves or drows. Although the drows were said to be the strongest race in the underground world, they did not control much territory. These drows were fond of infighting, and there were more than 10 families in each city. If they wanted to expand, they would need the Queen of Spiders, Lolth, to give an oracle. In a remote underground world like this, there were basically no drows in the city. "My lord, the gold mine is just ahead. We'll be there once we get out of this passage," the Grey Dwarf said excitedly. Sulen nodded. "As long as it's true, your reward will be given as soon as we return. Thank you very much for your generosity, my lord. I'm willing to serve you until death do us part." The Grey Dwarf immediately patted his chest to express his sincerity. Soon, the group walked out of the passage. At the end of the passage was a huge underground cave. After arriving here, Sulen found that there were many pale gold ores scattered on the ground. This vein was mainly chalcopyrite, and there were also gold ores. Adamantine and gold ores were buried here together. Sulen picked up a piece of ore and examined it. He found that the copper content of the ore was relatively high, and it was a high-grade ore. In addition to the gold ores, there were also some silver ores, but there were not many of them. The area of the vein in front of them was very large. Although he did not carefully observe the vein, it was obvious that it was a large comprehensive vein. There were not only gold ores here, but also many other ores. However, the Grey Dwarf would need to explore in detail to know how many ores there were. However, there was one more thing that needed to be done before the exploration, and that was to clear out all the monsters around the vein. Sullen's group was quickly discovered. After all, more than a dozen knell beetles were too conspicuous. However, what made Sulen feel strange was that there were more than one race of monsters secretly watching them. This was a little strange. In the underworld, unless one race had enslaved another race, this kind of situation rarely happened. However, this did not matter. Even if they all joined forces, they would not be able to do anything. Not long after, just as the Grey Dwarves were collecting ores, the monsters in the vein slowly approached in the dark and quickly surrounded them. After confirming that Sullen's group was surrounded, the monsters showed themselves. There were kobolds, underworld orcs, bugbears, and minotaurs. In total, there were a few hundred of them. What surprised Su Lan even more was that these monsters of different races were not chaotic at all. These monsters were all wielding weapons and wearing armor. Although they looked a little crude, they were all metal weapons. Although the underworld was rich in mineral resources, there were not many races that knew how to smelt metal. This army of a few hundred was actually equipped with armor. It looks like these people don't welcome us. Su Lan looked at these monsters in front of him. His eyes kept scanning them as if he was looking for something. At this moment, Su Lan suddenly saw a sphere with a diameter of about 6 feet from the corner of his eye. He immediately turned around. Behind these monsters, a large meatball was floating in mid-air. This meatball had a ferocious bloody mouth filled with sharp teeth. In the middle of the meatball was an eye that took up 1/3 of the entire meatball. In addition to this eye, there were more than 10 small eyes that were connected to each other extending out from the top of the meatball. After seeing these ferocious and deformed creatures, Su Lan immediately knew the name of these monsters, Beholder. These horrifying and deformed creatures were first born in the astral plane. It was said that their ancestor was a powerful creature that was comparable to the gods. Beholder was a monster that existed widely in the multiverse. They were best at mind control. And Beholder had a large army. In this aspect, perhaps only the mind flayers were better than them. Beholder was a ferocious, violent, and evil creature. They were born with strong psionic powers and could use this ability to enslave other races. It was obvious that this mine had been occupied by the Beholder. The armor and weapons on these monsters were also forged under the command of the Beholder. Looks like they're treating us as fat sheep. Seeing so many monsters surrounding them, Su Lan was not nervous at all. Chris, command these Nell beetles to charge. Chris's eyes moved and said softly, "Yes, Master." Although the Beholder controlled a large number of monsters, after controlling so many monsters, it could not perform precise operations. Although the army of a few hundred people was large in number, as they continued to move forward, the formation became loose. Seeing such a flaw, Chris naturally would not let go of it. After going through a few battles, Chris's commanding experience was obviously much better. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she immediately ordered 16 Nell beetles to attack. More than a dozen behemoths, each weighing 1 to 2 tons, rushed over. That earth-shattering aura was terrifying, but the monsters did not react. These monsters were all controlled by the Beholder. They basically did not have self-awareness, so naturally, they would not be afraid. However, could they block the charge of the Nell beetles just because they were not afraid? The answer was that it was impossible. Chapter 461. More than a dozen Nell beetles launched earthquake at the same time, causing the surrounding ground to tremble as if an earthquake had occurred. After the enemies fell, the dozen Nell beetles didn't slow down at all and continued to charge towards the Beholder. Seeing this situation, the huge eye-devil let out a furious roar. The monsters under its control sped up and charged forward. At the same time, 6 purple rays shot towards the few Nell beetles that were charging at the front. Charm monster. The 6 Nell beetles that were hit stopped and even their bodies began to tremble. Not good, the Beholder is fighting with me for control of the Nell beetles. Chris's expression changed slightly. As the 6 Nell beetles stopped, the Beholder once again shot out 6 purple rays. The Nell beetles that had just circled around from both sides were instantly hit by the rays. The charging Nell beetles were instantly petrified into 6 lifelike stone statues. It's not a Beholder, it's a broodmother's eye. Su Lan instantly reacted. The Beholder and the broodmother's eye were almost identical in appearance. The only difference was that the broodmother's eye was much bigger than the Beholder. However, it was Sullen's first time seeing a Beholder and he was a little far away. He didn't have a clear and accurate understanding of the beholder's body. He originally thought it was just an ordinary beholder. He didn't expect it to be a broodmother's eye. The broodmother's eye was the final form of the beholder. As for the more powerful ordinary beholder, it was basically impossible due to the bloodline. The broodmother's eye was also a legend rank monster. Its ability was far superior to ordinary beholders. Compared to ordinary beholders that could only shoot one ray, the broodmother's eye could shoot 6 rays at once. Moreover, the broodmother's eye could shoot 10 kinds of rays. These 10 kinds of rays included charm humans, charm monsters, disintegrate, fear, finger of death, petrification ray, damage ray, hypnosis ray, slow ray, and telekinesis ray. Its spellcasting level was equivalent to that of a level 20 spellcaster. It was completely a legendary warlock. Against such a legendary monster, relying solely on the Nell beetles would be a waste of time. Ordinary beholder's challenge level was around level 10. However, the broodmother's eye would require a complete team of level 16 adventurers. Chris, focus on controlling the Nell beetles to deal with the surrounding monsters. Leave the broodmother's eye to me. Sullen's body flashed with lightning and the storm war halberd appeared in his hand. After a brief explanation, he disappeared with a flash of light. Alternate space travel. Sullen's figure instantly entered a grotesque world. In the next second, he appeared beside the broodmother's eye. As soon as he appeared, the storm battle halberd in his hand smashed down on the broodmother. Fear. The broodmother's eye instantly fired an eye beam at Sulen, but this time, the spell did not have any effect. Sullen's strong will and iron will allowed him to pass through the fear spell. The storm war halberd didn't slow down at all as it ruthlessly slashed at the broodmother's eye. The energy barrier around the broodmother's eye only lasted for a second before it shattered with a loud bang. The storm war halberd had left a deep wound on its body. Asterisk sizzle. Asterisk the tentacles on the broodmother's eye wriggled and made a sizzling sound. Then, the broodmother's eye instantly opened its ferocious mouth and bit at Sulen. It looked like it was going to swallow him whole. You want to eat me? Aren't you afraid of breaking your teeth? Sulen curled his lips and instantly dodged to the side. Finger of death. 6 inches before it could steady itself, 6 consecutive purple beams instantly shot out from its eyes. 6 beams filled with the aura of death instantly hit Sulen. However, the broodmother's eye was disappointed. With Sullen's current physical fitness, the success rate of this kind of instant death spell was too low. Even if it was 6 consecutive beams, he could still easily withstand them. The only damage that could be done to him was the negative energy. In fact, divine creatures were immune to instant death spells. Although Sullen's divinity hadn't reached the level of a demigod, he was already a divine creature. Instant death spells had no effect on him. Seeing that Sulen didn't react after the finger of death hit, the broodmother's eye suddenly flew to the side, trying to distance itself from Sulen. However, how could Sulen let it have its way? His figure flashed as he chased after it. Disintegrate. 6-inch 6 red rays instantly flew towards Sulen. At the moment when they hit, a powerful force of thunder and lightning erupted from his body and formed a thunder shield, shrouding his body. The 6 disintegrate beams hit the surface of the thunder shield. The thunder shield flickered a few times before it shattered into countless lightning bolts. The disintegrate beams were also directly neutralized. Sulen didn't receive any damage. Sulen was also prepared for the broodmother's eye's attack. Power of thunder. Dazzling lightning instantly bloomed on Sullen's body. The powerful force of thunder constantly attacked the broodmother's eye under his control. The broodmother's tentacles were quickly electrocuted into black charcoal. Ah! A mournful scream was heard. Although the broodmother's eye kept releasing spells to resist, they were all destroyed by Sullen's powerful thunder. In the next moment, its huge body was hit by the thunder. A wave of pain and numbness made its body twitch continuously. Its huge body was paralyzed at this moment. Thunder explosion. A bolt of thunder as thick as a bucket instantly hit the broodmother's eye. The broodmother's eye's huge body was directly engulfed by the thunder. The broodmother's eye's body flickered with electric sparks. The original tentacles were also twisted and twitching. The pain and numbness from its body made it unable to resist. After Su Len reached the advanced legendary rank, his control of the Thunder Domain had become stronger. Even if he didn't activate the Thunder Domain, he could still use its power. Now, his normal attacks were infused with the power of the Thunder Domain. Although the broodmother's eye in front of him had reached the legendary rank, it was completely no match for Su Len. The spellcasting ability it was so proud of couldn't exert any power in the face of Su Luan. Although they were both at the legendary rank, there was a huge gap between an ordinary legendary and an advanced legendary. Moreover, Su Len had mastered the power of the Thunder Domain. The broodmother's eye couldn't resist him at all. Thunder Spear. A pale golden power of thunder instantly appeared in Sullen's hand. Then, it formed a spear made completely of thunder and lightning. It was also mixed with a trace of the power of the rules. As soon as the thunder spear took shape, a hair-raising feeling appeared on everyone on the battlefield. It was as if they were facing their natural enemy in an instant. Apart from purification, the power of the rules of thunder and lightning also had some power of judgment. This power was effective against almost everyone. Su Len immediately locked on to the broodmother's eye with his perception. Then, with a roar, he threw the thunder spear at it. A terrifying bolt of thunder directly streaked across the sky. At this moment, the entire underground cave was illuminated. The surrounding elemental energy seemed to be attracted by the thunder spear. It was as if the surrounding elemental energy was gathering towards the thunder spear. Golden lightning streaked across the sky. The spacious underground cave was instantly dyed golden by the lightning. Ah! The broodmother's eye's huge body was instantly pierced by the thunder spear. A hole with a diameter of 50 centimeters appeared in the center of its body. A large amount of flesh and blood was instantly reduced to ashes. Su Len deliberately avoided the broodmother's eyes. One had to know that the most valuable thing on this monster's body was its eye. If the eye was destroyed, the value of the broodmother's eye would be reduced by 90%. After the thunder spear was thrown, the broodmother's eye let out a cry of horror. It activated all of its psionic defensive force fields. However, under the effect of the thunder spear, the psionic defensive force fields shattered into countless pieces like glass. It couldn't withstand the impact of the thunder spear at all. The next moment, a terrifying hole appeared in its huge body. Its entire body was directly pierced by the thunder spear. Bang! The broodmother's eye's huge body fell to the ground like a small hill. Blood spurted out. Although it looked very miserable, the broodmother's eye was still alive. Its powerful life force was quickly draining away, and it could only struggle at death's door. Su Len didn't give it a chance to recover. His body flashed and appeared directly above the broodmother's eye. The storm battle halberd in his hand suddenly flashed with dazzling lightning. Then, he ruthlessly pierced the broodmother's eye's brain. The sharp storm battle halberd pierced the broodmother's eye's skin and mercilessly pierced its brain. The powerful lightning energy completely turned its brain into a pile of paste. After receiving another fatal blow, the broodmother's eye finally couldn't take it anymore. Its powerful life force disappeared in an instant. Its huge body collapsed with a loud bang. Only the tentacles were still trembling slightly. This was the reaction of the nerves in its body after being stimulated by the lightning. A high-quality magic gem appeared in Sullen's hand. Then, a powerful energy surged from his body. The magic gem instantly flew up and bloomed with a dazzling brilliance. Soul extraction. Confinement. Soul binding. Spell maximization plus magic gem. 3 consecutive spells were cast by Su Len. The soul of the broodmother's eye that had just died was instantly extracted from its corpse. The ferocious and terrifying soul struggled to escape. However, when it was alive, it wasn't a match for Su Len. Now that it was dead, it was even worse. Chapter 462. Chains of lightning flew out from Su Len's body and wrapped around the soul of the broodmother's eye as soon as they appeared. The lightning chains had a golden glow on them, which was the embodiment of the divine power in Su Len's body. The soul of the broodmother's eye, which was struggling to escape, suddenly lost its ability to move. This ferocious soul was slowly pulled towards the magic gem in the air by the lightning chains. Boom! The lightning dissipated, and the originally pure magic gem turned into a soul stone that flickered with purple light. After the spell was cast, the soul stone fell from the air. Su Len reached out and caught the gem. After looking at it for a while, a legendary soul stone was in his hands. Next, Su Len did not let go of the corpse of the broodmother's eye, which was like a mountain of flesh, and directly stored it in his storage space. The broodmother's eye was very rare in the multiverse. Its eye was a very precious magic material. If the craftsmanship was good, it was more than enough to make a legendary item. How could he let go of such a material? At the same time, the moment the broodmother's eye was killed by Su Len, the army of monsters that were besieging Crazy and the others immediately stopped attacking, and all of them fainted on the ground. Hundreds of kobolds, bugbears, underground orcs, and minotaurs all fainted. These monsters that were originally controlled by the broodmother's eye were also freed at this moment. Seeing this, the grey dwarves and drows heaved a sigh of relief. Then, they tied up these monsters with ropes. Those with light injuries were left behind, while those with heavy injuries were killed with a single slash. Crazy, on the other hand, had the Nell beetles under control again. As for the remaining 6 petrified Nell beetles, Su Len had to cast a spell to get rid of them. The effect of the petrification spell was very powerful. This spell first appeared on the Medusa, who was also an ancient abomination monster. It was said that this monster had the bloodline of the gods. Many petrification spells in the multiverse originated from her. After the successful casting of the petrification spell, it did not directly turn a person into a stone statue. In fact, the stone statue was only the effect of the spell. As long as the petrification spell was removed within an hour, the petrified person would recover. Of course, the prerequisite was that the stone statue had to be intact. Once the stone statue showed signs of missing an arm or a leg, the person would also lose an arm or a leg after the petrification was removed. Moreover, the petrification spell had to be removed within an hour. Once the time limit was exceeded, the stone statue that was originally the effect of the petrification spell would become a real stone statue. After the petrification spell was removed, the beetles that had turned into stone statues, Su Len had turned into stone. Su got everyone to clean the battlefield, while he found a place to look at his harvest this time. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have obtained a glorious victory. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have successfully defeated an Eye of the Nest Mother and annihilated its army. You have obtained 53,200 experience points. You have obtained an item, Life Gem X2. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have successfully killed an Eye of the Nest Mother. You have obtained 68,000 experience points. You have obtained 2 platinum treasure chests. You have obtained 1 legendary skill point for killing an Eye of the Nest Mother. The battle has ended. New Moon Year 1688, November, Underground World. Your servant discovered a gold mine in the underground world. You led an exploration team to explore the depths of the underground world. When you found the gold mine, you encountered an army led by the Eye of the Nest Mother. A battle broke out. In the end, you took the lead and successfully killed the Eye of the Nest Mother. You have obtained victory in this battle. Your name has begun to spread in the underground world. Prestige plus 20. Ding! Congratulations, host, your experience points have reached the maximum. Your profession level has been upgraded. You have obtained 2 free attribute points and 2 skill points. You have reached level 29. A series of notifications rang in Sullen's ears. The rewards from this battle were not bad. He obtained 1 legendary skill point, 1 legendary gem, 2 platinum treasure chests, and 2 life gems. Moreover, he had leveled up. He had obtained a large amount of experience points from killing the brain hunters. Not only had he leveled up, but he had also accumulated 3/4 of the experience bar for the next level. In addition to the experience he had accumulated during this period of time and this battle, his level had increased once again. Sulan had not used the bottle of golden 9 transformations pills he had obtained previously. In addition to the 2 free attribute points he had obtained this time, he had a total of 27 free attribute points. He could raise several of his original attributes to 50 points. He planned to use them all when he returned this time. In addition to the free attribute points, Sulan had also accumulated 1 legendary skill point and 4 free attribute points. He planned to level up his skills. This time, Sulan planned to level up his iron bone talent. Originally, this talent was an intermediate talent. To level it up to an advanced talent required 4 free attribute points. Now, it was just enough. Opening the attribute panel, Sulan found the intermediate iron bone talent and chose to level it up. A different kind of energy instantly appeared in his body and then quickly merged into his body. Sulan felt as if his body was constantly being bitten by countless ants. There was pain all over his body from the inside out. His bones were sore, itchy, and numb. All kinds of feelings appeared. Sulan clenched his fists. The rocks on the ground were crushed by his grip. His whole body was sweating profusely. After a while, this feeling gradually subsided. Finally, all the pain disappeared, and a gentle energy began to nourish his body. His whole body felt as if it was soaking in a hot spring. It was very comfortable. After a few minutes, this feeling completely subsided. Sulan opened his eyes. Feeling the dirt on his body, Sulan used cleanse to clean his body. After that, he sat down and checked his attribute panel. Advanced iron bone, after a long period of training, your body has become stronger. Normal attacks will cause less damage to you. Your defense will increase by 30%. Attacks with less than 15 points will not cause you any damage. After looking at the advanced iron bone skill, Sulan did not level it up to legendary. He needed his body to adapt to it before leveling it up. Therefore, Sulan planned to level it up after returning to Northern Town. After completing the leveling up, Sulan opened his inventory. There were 2 platinum treasure chests sitting there quietly. After taking a deep breath, Sulan chose to open the treasure chests. A beautiful sound and light effect flashed, and the system's cold voice rang in his ears. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the platinum treasure chest. You have obtained a mysterious item, Qilin Horn. Congratulations, host. You have successfully opened the platinum treasure chest. You have obtained an item, Blood Essence Stone. After hearing the system's voice, Sullen's face instantly flashed with joy. Then, he immediately took out the item that looked like a horn from his inventory. This Qilin horn was light gold in color. It was very hard and heavy to the hand. It was also covered in other energy. Sulan was still worrying about where to get this Qilin horn. He did not expect to get one from opening the treasure chest this time. Sulan was not clear about the other uses of the Qilin horn. However, the wonder blueprint that he had obtained said that the Qilin Pavilion needed this item to be built. Although the Qilin Pavilion's function was simple, it was very useful. It could improve the physical fitness of the horses and mounts in the territory. It could even make normal mounts mutate. Su Len was not clear about the effect. However, according to the characteristics of the wonder building, the effect should be very good. The other materials to build the Qilin Pavilion were not too rare. A portion of them could be found in the northern city. The other portion could also be bought with money. The most important item, the Qilin horn, was already available. When he returned, he would also build this wonder building. After putting away the Qilin horn, Su Len took out the blood essence stone. The blood essence stone was a red stone the size of an egg. Its surface was smooth, and it flickered with specks of light. It looked very beautiful. He opened the system and began to check the blood essence stone's attributes. Blood essence stone, this is a mysterious stone. It has a special magical power. Wearing this stone can increase the host's HP recovery speed and increase the host's maximum HP. It can also be used to make some items. After seeing the blood essence stone's attributes, Su Len curled his lips. This stone was basically useless to him. After he had legendary regeneration, his HP recovery speed was very fast. He basically did not need this stone. However, after seeing that the blood essence stone could be used to make magic items, Su Len decided to keep it. He would give it to Hathaway when he returned and let her do as she saw fit. After putting away these things, Su Len began to look at the 2 life gems in the storage space. These 2 gems were filled with life energy. They were light green and full of vitality. These magical gems were very rare. They had a magical effect, which was to increase one's HP. The life energy contained in the life gems was very rich and could be easily absorbed. At the same time, these gems were very important to druids. A life gem like this could increase one's lifespan by 15 years. For many nobles, this was almost impossible to refuse. As soon as these 2 life gems appeared, they would be immediately snatched up by others. However, these gems were very beneficial to druids. They could increase the success rate of a druid's advancement. After putting away the gems, Su Len stood up. This time, the harvest had been checked. Now, it was time to deal with the gold mine. After defeating the Eye of the Nest Mother, Su Len had obtained a large number of captives. Now, he needed a large amount of labor to develop the mine. Su Len planned to make these captives miners. At the same time, some of the slaves would be used to build the passage between here and Crete. Chapter 463. After dealing with the Eye of the Nest Mother, they captured more than 500 captives. These captives were all enslaved by the Eye of the Nest Mother. Now that the Eye of the Nest Mother was dead, these slaves naturally belonged to Suren. Although Chrissy's charm was powerful, she couldn't control so many people like the Nest Mother's eye. Therefore, Chrissy could only control the strongest people in the group. Without them, the rest of the slaves wouldn't have enough strength to rebel even if they wanted to. Next, Su Len divided the captives into groups of 50 and came up with a set of rules. A captain was chosen from each group and given some preferential treatment. They would immediately stand on Sullen's side and help Su Len oppress their own kind. This kind of thing happened too often in Sullen's northern city. Even now, there were still a lot of foreign overseers in the northern city. To prevent these slaves from escaping, Su Len divided each group into groups of 5. The slaves in the groups were to supervise each other. If someone escaped, everyone in the group would be punished. Moreover, the groups were to supervise each other. Those who reported the escapees would be rewarded. The highest reward was freedom, and the lowest reward was some food. At the same time, Su Len had the drows watch over the slaves. After completing the rules, Su Len had the slaves build a camp here. At the same time, he sent the Grey Dwarves to explore the gold mine in all directions. After everything was arranged, Su Len took Crazy to search for the Eye of the Nest Mother. Beholder creatures also liked precious metals and shiny things. Their nests often contained a lot of wealth. Although it wasn't as rich as dragons, it wasn't too far off. Su Len naturally wouldn't miss out on this wealth. Who would complain about having too much money? With a clever captive leading the way, Su Len and Crazy rushed to the eye of the nest mother. The eye of the nest mother's nest wasn't far from here. It was only about 2 kilometers away. It was located in a cave. At this time, there were some Taurens standing guard outside the cave. Even the eye of the nest mother had been killed by Su Len, so the Taurens were even easier to deal with. Zhao Fu casually threw out 5 lightning whips, causing the minotaurs to be paralyzed and unable to move, easily subduing them. Looking at the cave before him, Su Luan didn't enter directly. Who knew if there were any traps left behind by the nest mother's eye? Su Len looked around and saw that no one was around. Then he took his storm war halberd and walked towards the 2 Taurens. He kicked them and said coldly, "Don't play dead, get up." Sullen's spell wasn't to kill him, but to make him lose his ability to resist. One had to know that mining required a large number of slaves, and it was better to have one less slave die. "Don't kill me." The man struggled to get up. Although he didn't die, his injuries weren't light. At this moment, he was full of reverence for Su Len. In the Taoren tribe, only the prophet shaman had the power of magic. He could clearly sense that Su Len was far more powerful than the shamans in his tribe. Su Len put the storm war halberd on the Tauren's neck and asked in a low voice, "Who is your master?" Although the Taoren was in awe, he didn't tell Su Len about his master. It was as if his master had left a restriction on him. How troublesome. Remove the spell. A ray of light rose from Sullen's body, and the spell on the Taoren was removed. "Who is your master?" Su Len asked again. "It's an eye demon." After the spell was removed, the Taoren immediately told him what he knew. Soon, Su Len figured out the situation in the nest. Other than the nest mother's eye that he killed, there were 3 other eye demons in the nest. They were the servants of the nest mother's eye. Su Len was a little confused before. Why was there only one eye demon in the nest mother's eye? It turned out that the rest of the eye demons were all in the nest. After figuring this out, he naturally wouldn't let the eye demons go. Then, Su Len and the others entered the cave. After entering the cave, they realized that it was a completely different world. This was not a cave, but a castle. Most of the rock wall had been hollowed out, and small rooms had been excavated. There were many fluorescent stones inlaid on both sides of the road. Just as Su Luan was still observing the surroundings, a burst of footsteps came, and more enemies appeared. This time, other than the Taoren, orcs, and other underground races, there were also 3 eye demons. Although the eye demons were strong, it depended on who the opponent was. As soon as the 3 eye demons appeared, they immediately cast demonic ray at Su Len. However, after hitting, there was no reaction. Sullen's constitution easily withstood the test of toughness. These spells only caused some minor damage to him. With his strong regeneration ability, he recovered quickly. Su Len raised his hand and cast 5 lightning whips. The arcs of lightning bounced quickly on the monsters, and the monsters that rushed up were immediately paralyzed. Sullen's body flashed and appeared near a few eye demons. The eye demons were easily killed by him without any resistance. Next, Su Len and Chris quickly cleaned up the entire castle. All 3 eye demons in the castle were killed, and Su Len collected 3 more eye demon corpses. The remaining 100 or so people in the castle were dealt with in the same way as before. Su Len began to look at the spoils of war this time. As the difference in strength between the enemies and himself was too great, and there were no legendary creatures, there were only some experience points and magic gems as rewards. There was not even a silver treasure chest. After conquering the dungeon, Su Len immediately sent someone to inform Aiden to cancel the construction of the territory. This dungeon was very suitable for a territory. The dungeon was not big. Su Len did a simple survey. It was more than enough for thousands of people to live in. Moreover, it was easy to defend and difficult to attack. The dungeon was surrounded by hard rocks, and there was only one entrance. There were tunnels dug into the mountain walls, and there were squares, houses, and streets. It was a small city. The largest room was where the Eye of the Nest Mother lived. After Su Len entered the room, he discovered a small mountain of gold and jewels in the middle of the room. In this dungeon, the Eye of the Nest Mother was worshipped by the eye demons and the monsters under their control as a god. These items were offerings to the Eye of the Nest Mother. Now that the Eye of the Nest Mother had been killed by Su Len, the gold and jewels in the room were all Sullen's spoils of war. After seeing the treasures, Sullen's heart raced. Then, he ordered his subordinates to count the treasures. Most of the treasures were gold. After all, there was a gold mine, and the purity of the gold was only average. Besides the gold, there were also many magic gems. After counting, there were more than 2 tons of gold and thousands of magic gems. Of course, most of the magic gems were of average quality, and less than 1/10 of the magic gems were of high quality. Su Len asked the Grey Dwarf to refine the gold into gold bricks and store them in his storage space. 2 tons of magic gems sounded like a lot, but in reality, the gold bricks were less than 100 million cubic meters in size. Including the magic gems, the total volume was less than 2 cubic meters. Sullen's storage space could easily fit them all. While the Grey Dwarf was exploring the veins, the slaves were not idle. Su Len arranged for them to repair the roads. The tunnels leading to Crete had to be widened and strengthened, and many of the uneven roads had to be smoothed out. After making the necessary arrangements, Su Len took some time to return to Northern City. He handed over the gold he'd obtained to the mint for casting, and sent the magical gems to the wizard tower. At the same time, Su Len brought some men from Crete. When he came to the underground city again, 3 days had passed. After all, Su Len had only brought a little more than 20 people with him the first time he came. If he stayed here all the time, the slaves would not dare to do anything to him. However, he could not stay here all the time, so he transferred some people from the city of Crete. In addition to preventing the slaves from causing trouble, these people's task was to clean up the area around the mine. When Su Len returned, the Grey Dwarf had already begun to instruct the slaves to dig. As the area of the mine was too large, it would take a lot of time to explore. Therefore, they had to dig and explore at the same time. Although only a part of the exploration had been carried out, the results made Su Len overjoyed. Besides the gold, there were many other associated minerals. The Grey Dwarf had also found some fine gold. Based on what they had discovered so far, the reserves of fine gold were not bad. In addition, there were also topaz, pyroxene, chalcopyrite, pyrite, and so on. There were even some gemstones. The magic gems in the room of the Eye of the Nest Mother should have been excavated from here. However, the quality of the gemstones here was average. There were not many high-quality gemstones. Among the slaves, the kobolds and underground orcs were assigned to mining, while the taurens were sent to build the tunnels. Su Len and Chris began to sweep the territories around the dungeon. If they wanted to mine the mines, it would be impossible to rely on the hundreds of slaves in front of them. It was not realistic to transfer slaves from Crete or Orlando City. Both Crete and Orlando City needed slaves for mining, so they couldn't afford to spare too many people for that. Fortunately, there were other tribes living around the gold mine. Su Len led his men to conquer these tribes one by one. The slaves were sent to the newly opened mine to mine. After a round of clearing, the potential threats around the mine were eliminated. The miners were also replenished. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.